Nobody wants you around, Mother.
Nobody wants you around, Mother. What if the daughter you poured your heart into, the child you sacrificed everything for, spat those words at you on the eve of Christmas? What if every gift, every dollar, every moment of love you gave was just fuel for her greed? Welcome to Voices of Auntie Rose, where stories of family, forgiveness, resilience, and the courage to rise above betrayal come to life with heart and soul. We're so glad you're here, joining a community that celebrates the unbreakable human spirit. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an inspiring story. And it would be amazing if you could like this video, share it, or drop a comment letting us know what time it is and which city or country you're watching from. Your shares and comments are the greatest gift, the powerful inspiration that keeps this channel growing and spreading meaningful life lessons every single day. Now, let's dive into today's story. The Victorian house on Summit Avenue in St. Paul had never looked more festive. At 72, Margaret Thompson had spent 3 days transforming her home into a Christmas wonderland, stringing lights along every gable, wrapping garland around the porch columns, and placing electric candles in all 27 windows. The 12-foot Fraser fir in the living room sparkled with ornaments collected over 5 decades, each one holding a memory of Christmases when her daughter Sarah still believed in magic. Standing in her kitchen, Margaret carefully arranged sugar cookies on the Spode Christmas Tree platter that had belonged to her mother. The same platter that used to hold cookies for Sarah's school parties, back when her daughter would throw her arms around Margaret's neck and declare her the best mommy in the whole world. Those days felt like yesterday and a lifetime ago simultaneously. The phone rang, interrupting her reverie. Sarah's name appeared on the caller ID, and Margaret's heart lifted the way it always did, that foolish, unconditional surge of maternal hope. "Hi, sweetheart," Margaret answered warmly. "I was just thinking about you. I'm making your favorite ginger snaps for Christmas dinner. Should I set the table for 2, or will Jason be joining us?" There was a pause. Then Sarah's voice came through, crisp and businesslike. "Oh, about that. Jason and I are actually flying to Aspen for Christmas. His parents rented a lodge for the whole family." Margaret's hand tightened on the phone. "But we always spend Christmas together. It's our tradition. Ever since your father passed—" "Mom, traditions change," Sarah interrupted, her tone carrying that particular note of impatience she'd perfected over the past few years. "We're adults now. We make our own traditions." "Of course, dear. I understand." Margaret's voice remained steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Perhaps I could join you? I could book a flight?" Sarah's laugh was sharp, almost cruel. "Mom, this is a special gathering. Jason's family has been planning it for months. They only invited people who are really part of their inner circle. You understand." "Special, inner circle." The words hit Margaret like shards of ice. For 6 years, she'd been paying $2,600 monthly for Sarah and Jason's luxury apartment in downtown Minneapolis. She'd furnished their entire home with pieces from room and board and restoration hardware, spending nearly $40,000 because Sarah insisted they needed quality pieces that would last. She'd covered their car payments when Jason's startup struggled, paid off Sarah's student loans, funded their vacations, their wardrobes, their entire lifestyle. But she wasn't special enough for Christmas. "Besides," Sarah continued, her voice taking on that sweet, manipulative tone she used when she sensed she'd gone too far, "you know how Jason's mother is, very particular about her guest lists. It would be awkward." Margaret knew exactly how Jason's mother was. She'd never even met the woman in 3 years of her daughter's marriage. Another exclusion that Sarah had explained away with vague excuses and practiced lies. "I see," Margaret said quietly. "Well, I hope you have a wonderful time." "We will." Sarah's voice brightened, relieved to avoid confrontation. "Oh, and Mom? The January rent is due on the 1st. $2,600, same as always. You won't forget, will you? The management company charges a huge late fee." The audacity of it, discussing rent payments in the same breath as excluding her from Christmas, made Margaret's stomach turn. She looked at the cookies she'd been arranging, at the presents already wrapped under the tree with Sarah and Jason's names on them, at the sterling silver frame holding a photo of 5-year-old Sarah on Santa's lap, grinning with pure joy. "Actually, Sarah," Margaret said, her voice gaining strength, "I need to discuss the rent situation with you." "What's to discuss?" Sarah's tone turned sharp. You've always handled it. Yes, I have. For 6 years. $78,000 in rent alone, not counting everything else. Are you keeping track now? Sarah's laugh was bitter. How maternal of you. Margaret closed her eyes. I'm 72 years old, Sarah. I'm living on a fixed income from your father's pension and my Social Security. I've depleted half my savings supporting you. Supporting us? Sarah's voice rose. We're your family. Isn't that what family does? Family includes each other in Christmas celebrations, Margaret replied quietly. Family doesn't treat each other as ATMs while excluding them from special gatherings. Oh my God, are you seriously going to be this petty about one Christmas? One Christmas. As if this were an isolated incident. As if she hadn't been excluded from their anniversary dinner, their housewarming party, Jason's promotion celebration, all events Margaret had learned about afterward through Instagram, seeing her daughter smiling in photos with Jason's family, holding champagne glasses Margaret had purchased, wearing jewelry Margaret had gifted. I'm going to hang up now, Sarah, Margaret said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Enjoy Aspen. Mom, wait. Margaret placed the phone in its cradle with deliberate calm, then sank into a kitchen chair. The cheerful Christmas music from the radio felt like mockery. She'd spent $3,000 on their Christmas presents, a new MacBook for Sarah, golf clubs for Jason, gifts for the special people who didn't consider her special enough. She sat there until the winter sun began to set, painting the sky the color of her pain, deep purple bruising into black. That sleepless night stretched endlessly, each tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway marking another second of Margaret's torment. She'd vomited twice, her body rejecting even the thought of food as violently as Sarah had rejected her. The physical pain in her chest was so intense, she'd actually checked her pulse, wondering if a 72-year-old heart could literally break from emotional trauma. By dawn, Margaret had made 17 cups of tea she couldn't drink, each one growing cold as she stared at her laptop screen. Sarah's Instagram feed glowed mockingly in the dim morning light. There it was, posted just 6 hours after their phone call, a photo of Sarah and Jason at the Minneapolis airport, first-class boarding passes prominently displayed, captioned, Aspen bound with the fam. Number blessed holidays. Number family first. Family first. The irony burned like acid in Margaret's throat. Her trembling fingers moved to November's posts, then October's, searching for signs she'd missed. And there, dated November 24th, Thanksgiving Day, was the image that shattered her remaining illusions. Sarah and Jason hosting a full Thanksgiving dinner in their apartment, the dining room Margaret had furnished packed with Jason's family. The Le Creuset cookware Margaret had bought them for their wedding displayed on the sideboard. The caption read, So grateful for family who matters. Mom Lancaster made her famous stuffing. Mom Lancaster. Jason's mother, who'd never once acknowledged Margaret's existence, was Mom. While Margaret, who'd raised Sarah alone after Tom's heart attack, who'd worked double shifts as a nurse to put Sarah through college, who'd sacrificed her retirement security, she wasn't even worth a phone call on Thanksgiving. Margaret's hands shook so violently she knocked over the latest cold tea, watching it spread across the granite countertop she'd installed, thinking Sarah would one day bring grandchildren here for Christmas cookies. The liquid pooled around a stack of bank statements she'd pulled out at 3 a.m, the numbers blurring through her tears but the total sickeningly clear. $168,000 over 6 years. Not just rent and furniture, but medical bills when Jason broke his leg skiing, the down payment for their Audi Q7, Sarah's boutique shopping sprees that she claimed were necessary for Jason's business networking. The doorbell's chime made her jump. Through the frosted glass, she could see her neighbor, Dorothy Chen, holding what looked like a casserole dish. Margaret, honey, I saw your lights on all night, Dorothy said when Margaret opened the door, her voice gentle with concern. I brought breakfast. May I come in? Margaret stepped aside wordlessly. Dorothy took one look at her, at the dark circles, the trembling hands, the defeat written across her face, and set down the casserole with purpose. What happened? Dorothy asked simply. The story poured out in broken fragments while Dorothy quietly made fresh coffee and forced Margaret to eat small bites of the egg casserole. When Margaret showed her the Instagram posts, Dorothy's expression hardened. That ungrateful little witch, Dorothy muttered, then louder. Margaret, I'm going to say something that might hurt, but you need to hear it. I've watched Sarah visit exactly 3 times this year. 3. And each time she left with shopping bags or a check. I've seen you cancel your book club to rush money to her. I've watched you wear the same winter coat for 5 years while she posts pictures in designer clothes you bought. She's my daughter, Margaret whispered, the words both explanation and lament. No, Dorothy said firmly. A daughter doesn't do this. A parasite does. The harsh truth hung between them as Margaret's phone began buzzing. Sarah's name appeared, and Margaret almost didn't answer. But habit, that maternal programming that ran deeper than logic, made her reach for it. Mom, I need to talk to you about something important. Sarah's voice was different, urgent, stressed. There's been a situation with the apartment. What situation? Margaret's voice was hollow. The building management company is requiring a massive security deposit renewal by December 31st, $25,000. They're claiming there's been damage, which is ridiculous. But if we don't pay, they'll evict us in January. $25,000. Margaret felt the room spin. Sarah, I don't have $25,000 to give you. What do you mean you don't have it? Sarah's voice pitched higher, angrier. You have Dad's life insurance. You have the house. You always have money when we need it. I've given you everything, Margaret said, her voice breaking. I've depleted my savings. I'm living on Social Security and what's left of Dad's pension. This is unbelievable, Sarah snapped. Jason's parents would never leave him hanging like this. They understand what family means. The cruelty of it, comparing her to the parents who'd excluded her while taking everything she had, finally snapped something in Margaret. Then ask them, she said quietly. What? Ask Jason's parents, since they understand family so well, since they're the ones you're spending Christmas with. Ask them for the $25,000. You're being vindictive, Sarah accused, just because you're jealous about Christmas. Goodbye, Sarah. Margaret hung up and immediately blocked the number. Then she collapsed to the kitchen floor, Dorothy catching her just before she hit the tile. The sobs that came were primal, decades of suppressed grief and rage pouring out while Dorothy held her, rocking her like the child she'd never stopped mothering, even when that child had become a stranger who saw her only as a bank account with a pulse. The phone began ringing again, Jason's number this time, then unknown numbers. The siege had begun. Change your number, Dorothy said firmly. Today. And Margaret? It's time to protect yourself. My daughter-in-law is an elder law attorney. You need to see her immediately. Margaret nodded, still trembling but feeling something new kindling beneath the pain, a cold, clear anger that felt like awakening. Dorothy's daughter-in-law, Patricia Chen Williams, arrived within an hour, her professional demeanor softening when she saw Margaret's condition. The elder law attorney took one look at the scattered bank statements, the tear-stained documents, and Margaret's trembling hands before setting down her briefcase with grim determination. Mrs. Thompson, what I'm seeing here are classic signs of financial elder abuse, Patricia said, her voice gentle but firm. Before we proceed, I need you to understand that this might get uglier before it gets better. Are you prepared for that? Margaret nodded, clutching a glass of water Dorothy had forced into her hands. The tremors hadn't stopped since Sarah's call about the $25,000. Her body felt foreign, disconnected, as if she were floating above herself watching some other woman's life implode. I need to see everything, Patricia continued. Every financial record, every transaction, every communication. We're building a paper trail that... The doorbell's aggressive ringing interrupted her. Through the security camera app on Margaret's phone, ironically, Sarah had insisted she install it for safety. They could see Sarah and Jason standing on the porch. Sarah was dressed in the Canada Goose parka Margaret had bought her last winter, $1,200 that could have paid for Margaret's medications for 6 months. Don't answer, Patricia advised, but Sarah had already spotted movement through the window. Mom, I know you're in there. Sarah's voice carried through the door, loud enough for neighbors to hear. We drove all the way from downtown. You can't just ignore us. Margaret's legs felt like water, but she made herself walk to the door, Patricia and Dorothy flanking her protectively. When she opened it, keeping the chain lock engaged, Sarah's face was flushed with anger, not concern. This is ridiculous, Sarah spat. Hiding behind a chain like we're criminals. We're your family. Family? Margaret repeated, the word tasting like ash. Is that what you call it? Jason stepped forward, his expression calculating. Margaret noticed he was wearing the Rolex she'd helped them purchase for his 30th birthday, essential for business meetings, Sarah had insisted. Margaret, let's discuss this rationally, Jason said, using that patronizing tone he'd perfected. Sarah may have been insensitive about Christmas, but cutting us off financially is an extreme overreaction. Cutting you off? Margaret's voice cracked. I've given you everything. My retirement, my savings, my security. Nobody forced you, Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp as broken glass. You offered, you insisted, and now suddenly you're the victim? Patricia stepped into view. Miss Thompson, Mr. Lancaster, I'm representing Mrs. Thompson in this matter. Any further communication should go through my office. Sarah's face went white, then red with rage. You hired a lawyer? Against your own daughter? The daughter who excluded me from Thanksgiving? Margaret's voice grew stronger, fueled by Patricia's presence. The daughter who hasn't visited except to collect money? The daughter who posts photos calling another woman mom while treating me like an ATM? That's different, Sarah shouted. Jason's mother understands boundaries. She doesn't guilt-trip us or make everything about money. The irony was so profound that Margaret actually laughed, a broken, bitter sound that made Sarah step back. I need to show you something, Margaret said suddenly, leaving the chain engaged but gesturing for them to wait. She returned with a photo album, holding it up through the gap. See this? Christmas 2018. You were 29, Sarah. You just lost your job. And I paid your rent for 8 months. Look how you're smiling in this picture, calling me the best mom in the world in your toast. She flipped pages. Thanksgiving 2019. I cooked for 3 days. You brought Jason for the first time. You said you'd never been happier. That same week I gave you $15,000 for your wedding planning. Another page. Your wedding. 2020. The wedding I paid $30,000 for. Look at my face in the background of this reception photo. I'm glowing with pride. Now look at your face. You're not even looking at me. You're looking at Jason's parents, the people who contributed nothing but demanded the best seats. Sarah's jaw clenched. Stop playing the martyr, mother. This past Thanksgiving, Margaret continued, her voice breaking, the one you hosted without telling me, using the dining set I bought, the china I gifted, the silverware that was your grandmother's. I spent that day alone, eating a microwave dinner, wondering what I'd done wrong. Oh my God, you're pathetic, Sarah snarled, and the cruelty of it made even Jason flinch. No wonder Dad probably died just to get away from you. The words hit Margaret like a physical blow. She actually staggered, Patricia catching her arm. Tom had died of a massive coronary at 58, leaving Margaret to raise 14-year-old Sarah alone. The grief, the terror, the years of working double shifts to maintain their life while Sarah finished high school and college, all reduced to this vicious barb. Dorothy gasped audibly. You horrible, ungrateful. What? Sarah challenged. What am I? Say it. You're done, Margaret said quietly, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. You're completely done. I'm changing my will tomorrow. Every penny will go to charity, to people who actually need help, not entitled adults who weaponize their parents' grief. You can't do that. Jason stepped forward aggressively. We have rights. That money is ours. Yours? Patricia interjected coolly. Under what legal theory? The "we deserve it because we want it" doctrine? Sarah pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Fine. You want to play hardball? I'm posting everything on Facebook. Everyone will know what kind of mother you really are. Controlling, manipulative, using money to buy love. Post away, Margaret said, finding strength in her fury. Make sure to include the receipts I have. $168,000 over 6 years. Your rent, your car, your clothes, your vacations, your entire lifestyle funded by the mother you just said your father died to escape. Sarah's face contorted with rage. You know what? Jason's parents were right about you. They said you were toxic, that you'd try to control us with money. That's why they didn't want you at Thanksgiving or Christmas. Nobody wants you around, Mother. Nobody. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Margaret felt her knees buckling, her heart rhythm irregular, the chest pain that had been building suddenly sharp and radiating down her left arm. Patricia immediately called 911, while Dorothy held Margaret upright. "Are you happy now?" Dorothy shouted at Sarah. "She's having a cardiac event." Sarah's expression flickered for just a moment, not with concern, but with calculation. "If she dies, we inherit everything immediately," she said quietly to Jason, but not quietly enough. Everyone heard it. Even Jason looked shocked. The ambulance sirens grew closer as Margaret struggled to breathe, but through the pain, she heard Patricia's clear voice. "I recorded everything. Every word. This is evidence of elder abuse and attempted financial exploitation. You just confessed to hoping for your mother's death for monetary gain." As the EMTs arrived and began treating Margaret, Sarah and Jason retreated to their Audi, Sarah's final words carrying across the frozen lawn. "This isn't over. That money belongs to us. We'll get it one way or another." Margaret, oxygen mask over her face, made eye contact with Patricia and mouthed 2 words. "Protect me." Patricia nodded grimly. The battle had escalated beyond mere family dysfunction. This was war. The hospital room's fluorescent lights felt harsh against Margaret's pale skin as she regained consciousness. The cardiac event had been minor, stress-induced arrhythmia, the doctors said, but the emotional wounds ran deeper than any physical ailment. Patricia sat beside her bed, laptop open, while Dorothy held her hand. "Margaret," Patricia said gently, "while you were sedated, Sarah and Jason attempted to access your bank accounts. They went to 3 different branches claiming to be your medical power of attorney." Margaret's heart monitor spiked slightly. What? "The good news is, the banks flagged it as suspicious and called me since I'd already filed preliminary paperwork. The bad news is, this shows premeditation. They're escalating." Dorothy squeezed Margaret's hand. "There's more, honey. They've been calling your neighbors, spinning stories about your mental state." Mrs. Harrison from 2 houses down called me, concerned. "Sarah told her you've been showing signs of dementia." The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain. Margaret remembered teaching Sarah to ride her bike on their street, the neighbors cheering when she finally balanced on 2 wheels. Now that same daughter was poisoning those relationships, trying to paint her as incompetent. "I need to make calls," Margaret said, her voice stronger than she felt. "First, my financial advisor." Within hours, Margaret's financial advisor, Robert Christensen, arrived with documents. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm moving all your liquid assets into a trust immediately. Sarah and Jason won't be able to touch anything without a court order." "How much do I have left?" Margaret asked quietly. "After they're bleeding you dry?" "About $300,000 in various accounts and investments, plus the house valued at $600,000. You should have had twice that, if not 4. He trailed off, professional discretion warring with obvious disgust. That evening, as Margaret was preparing for discharge, her phone rang from an unknown number. Against Patricia's advice, she answered. "Mrs. Thompson? This is Emily Lancaster, Jason's sister." Margaret's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you want?" "To warn you," Emily said quickly. "I'm an accountant, and I just discovered something. Jason and Sarah have been planning this for 18 months. I found emails, spreadsheets calculating your net worth, discussions about how to get power of attorney. They call it Project Inheritance." Margaret's stomach turned. "Project Inheritance?" "They've been systematically documenting things out of context, recording conversations after deliberately agitating you, taking photos when you look tired to claim you're declining, even creating fake medical documents. Mrs. Thompson, they took out a $75,000 loan against their apartment, claiming you co-signed. You didn't, did you?" "No," Margaret gasped. "I never co-signed anything." "That's fraud," Emily said. "Federal fraud. I have copies of everything. I can't stand by and watch this. My grandmother went through something similar with my uncle. It destroyed her final years." "Why are you helping me?" Margaret asked, suspicious despite her desperation. "Because what they're doing is evil," Emily replied simply. "And because at Thanksgiving, when Sarah was laughing about you eating alone, it made me sick. No mother deserves that. I'll testify if needed." After Emily hung up, Margaret looked at Patricia and Dorothy. "I want to press charges. For fraud, elder abuse, attempted theft, everything." Patricia nodded grimly. "We'll need to move fast. Based on what Emily just revealed, they might try something desperate." 3 days later, Margaret was home with a new security system Dorothy's son had installed. Camera footage showed Sarah and Jason driving by repeatedly, sometimes parking across the street for hours. The restraining order Patricia filed was temporary, but it was a start. On the fourth day, December 20th, Margaret received a FedEx package. Inside was a letter from Sarah, typed, not handwritten. "Mother, your dramatic hospital performance doesn't change the facts. You owe us. Every sacrifice you made was your choice, your obligation as a parent. The money Dad left was meant for the family's future, not for you to hoard while we struggle. Jason and I have consulted with attorneys. A parent who deliberately impoverishes their child after years of financial dependence could be liable for damages. You created this dependency. You encouraged it. Now you want to abandon us to feel powerful? We're prepared to file for conservatorship based on your recent erratic behavior, the cardiac event clearly indicating stress-induced mental decline, and testimony from concerned parties about your paranoid delusions. Or we can settle this quietly, $500,000, and we disappear from your life forever. You keep the house and enough to live modestly. We all move on. You have 48 hours. Sarah." Margaret read it 3 times, each word a new laceration. Her daughter had become a stranger, a predator circling what she perceived as weak prey. "Extortion," Patricia said flatly after reading it. "Clear, documented extortion. This letter is a gift to our case." But Margaret wasn't listening. She was staring at a photo on the mantel. Sarah at 16, hugging Margaret after Tom's funeral, whispering, "Don't worry, Mom. We'll take care of each other. Forever." "Forever lasted until the money ran low," Margaret said bitterly. Dorothy rubbed her shoulder. "What do you want to do?" Margaret stood slowly, walking to her desk with new purpose. She pulled out stationery, real paper, her mother's monogrammed sheets, and began writing in her careful script. "Sarah, your letter is the final confirmation that the daughter I loved died long ago, replaced by someone I don't recognize. You speak of obligations. My obligation was to raise you to 18, which I did with love, sacrifice, and devotion. Everything after that was gift, not duty. You mention your father's money. Let me remind you what that money was. His life insurance, paid because he worked himself to death ensuring you'd have opportunities. He'd be heartbroken to see what you've become. I decline your offer of extortion. Instead, I'm offering you truth. The FBI has been notified of your fraudulent loan. The state's Elder Abuse Unit has opened a case. Your project inheritance documentation has been provided to authorities. You have 48 hours to leave the state before warrants are issued. This is my final communication. Margaret Thompson, the mother you never deserved." She sealed it, handed it to Patricia to send via her law office, then collapsed into her chair, finally allowing herself to grieve not for what was, but for what had never truly been. 24 hours after sending the letter, Margaret's Victorian house became a fortress under siege. The security cameras captured everything. Sarah and Jason's Audi circling the block like vultures, sometimes 6 times within an hour. Dorothy stayed over, refusing to leave Margaret alone, while Patricia coordinated with law enforcement from Margaret's dining room, now converted into a makeshift legal command center. At 7:30 in the evening, December 21st, the doorbell rang insistently. The camera showed Sarah, but this time she wasn't alone. Jason stood beside her, along with his parents, the infamous Lancaster family who deemed Margaret unworthy of their Aspen Christmas. "Don't engage," Patricia warned, but Margaret was already moving toward the door, drawn by a masochistic need to face the complete betrayal. Through the security chain, Margaret saw Barbara Lancaster for the first time, a woman in her 60s with perfectly coiffed blonde hair, wearing a fur coat that cost more than Margaret's annual pension. Richard Lancaster stood behind his wife, his expression cold and calculating, the source of Jason's predatory nature now obvious. "So you're the woman trying to destroy our children," Barbara said, her voice dripping with disdain. "How utterly pathetic." Margaret's hands shook, but her voice remained steady. "I'm the woman who funded your son's lifestyle for 6 years while you vacationed in Aspen." "We don't enable weakness," Richard Lancaster interjected, his tone suggesting Margaret's generosity was somehow a character flaw. If Jason needed help, he should have earned it. "Interesting philosophy," Dorothy called out from behind Margaret, "yet here you are, enabling their extortion attempts." Sarah's face contorted with rage. "It's not extortion. It's what she owes us. Mom, you promised. You said family takes care of family. I did take care of family, Margaret replied, her voice breaking. $168,000 worth of care, while you were calling another woman mom at Thanksgiving. Barbara Lancaster laughed, a cruel sound that made Margaret's stomach turn. Oh, please. Sarah only calls me that because I've earned the title. I taught her about strength, ambition, setting boundaries with toxic people. Toxic? Margaret felt bile rising in her throat. I worked double shifts as a nurse when Sarah's father died. I went without meals so she could have dance lessons. I wore the same shoes for 3 years so she could have the prom dress she wanted. And look how weak it made her, Barbara responded coldly. Dependent on handouts instead of building her own success. We're helping her break free from your suffocating codependence. The cruelty was so calculated, so precise that Margaret actually staggered. Patricia stepped forward, her phone recording everything. Mrs. Lancaster, Mr. Lancaster, you're currently being recorded. Any further harassment will be added to our legal documentation. Jason pulled out his phone, showing the screen to Margaret through the gap. See this, Margaret? It's a petition for conservatorship. We've got 3 signatures from medical professionals stating you're showing signs of severe cognitive decline. What medical professionals? Patricia demanded. Dr. Harold Brennan, psychiatrist. Dr. Monica Webb, geriatric specialist. And Dr. James Chen, neurologist. Jason read smugly. Emily's voice suddenly came from Margaret's phone. She was on speaker with Patricia's assistant, listening in. Those are fake. I know because Jason paid a website $300 to create false medical documents. I have the receipt. Jason's face went white. Emily? What are you? I'm done staying silent. Emily's voice continued. Mrs. Thompson, I just emailed Patricia everything. Financial records showing they've been planning this for 2 years. Jason's spreadsheet calculating how long you'd likely live based on actuarial tables. Sarah's journal entries about managing the old lady's decline. Sarah screamed, "You treacherous witch! You're supposed to be family." Family doesn't plan to psychologically torture a 72-year-old woman into an early grave for money, Emily shot back. Barbara Lancaster turned on her daughter-in-law with venom. Sarah, you told us she was senile, that she was wasting the family money on gambling and shopping sprees. You never mentioned she'd been supporting you entirely. The revelation hung in the air. Sarah had been lying to everyone, painting Margaret as incompetent to justify their scheme. Margaret felt her knees buckling again, the weight of the betrayal physically crushing her. She'd been character assassinated by her own daughter, turned into a caricature of senility to justify theft. "Get off my property," Margaret whispered, then louder, "Get off my property now." Richard Lancaster sneered. "We're not done here. That money..." "The money is protected in an irrevocable trust as of this morning," Patricia announced, "and the FBI's Elder Fraud Unit has opened an investigation based on the fraudulent loan documents. You have bigger problems than Margaret's inheritance." Sarah lunged at the door, rattling the chain. "You're killing me. Do you understand? Without that money, we lose everything. The apartment, the cars, our entire life. Jason's business is failing. We're drowning in debt." "Then get jobs," Margaret said quietly. "Like everyone else." "Jobs?" Sarah laughed hysterically. "I'm 33 years old with no work history because you always covered everything. You made me this way. You created this dependency and now you're abandoning me." The accusation hit Margaret like a physical blow because there was a grain of truth in it. She had enabled this, had created this monster through misguided love and guilt over Tom's death. But that didn't justify what Sarah had become. "I loved you too much," Margaret admitted, tears streaming down her face. "That was my mistake. But what you've become... this cruel, calculating stranger who hoped I'd die on my doorstep for money, that's all you." Barbara Lancaster pulled Sarah back. "We're leaving. This is beneath us." She looked at Margaret with undisguised contempt. "No wonder your husband died young. Living with such weakness probably killed him." The words were so cruel that even Richard Lancaster looked uncomfortable. Margaret collapsed against the doorframe, Dorothy catching her as Patricia called 911 again. "Second cardiac event in a week," Patricia told the dispatcher. "We need an ambulance immediately." As sirens wailed in the distance, Sarah's final words carried across the frozen yard. "When you die alone, remember, you chose this. You chose money over your own daughter." Margaret, gasping for breath, managed 4 words: "You chose it first." The ambulance arrived as the Lancasters' Mercedes pulled away, leaving Margaret broken on her own doorstep, surrounded by legal documents and shattered dreams of what family should have been. The second hospital stay lasted 3 days. This time, the doctors were less optimistic. Dr. Catherine Morrison, the head of cardiology at Regent's Hospital, held Margaret's hand as she delivered the diagnosis. "Mrs. Thompson, the stress is causing severe cardiomyopathy. Your heart muscle is weakening. If these episodes continue..." She didn't need to finish. Margaret understood. Her daughter was literally killing her with cruelty. On the morning of December 24th, Christmas Eve, Emily Lancaster arrived at the hospital with a manila envelope that would change everything. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she handed it to Margaret. "I found something else," Emily whispered, glancing around nervously. "Something that explains why they're so desperate. Mrs. Thompson, Sarah, and Jason aren't just in debt. They're in massive trouble." Patricia leaned forward, opening the envelope. Inside were bank statements, loan documents, and something else, a contract with a private lending company known for its connections to organized crime. "Sweet mother of," Dorothy breathed, reading over Patricia's shoulder. "They borrowed $300,000 from these people," Emily explained, her voice shaking. "Not from a bank, from Victor Kozlov's operation. They used your house as collateral, Mrs. Thompson. They forged your signature on a deed transfer that they haven't filed yet, if they don't pay by January 1st. You've made it this far, go ahead and hit. Like to let me know you're still with me. You know, every share you make might help someone out there find a little hope. And before we continue, don't forget to subscribe because who knows, the next story might just touch your heart." Margaret's world tilted. The room spun as the implications hit her. "My house? They forged documents for my house?" "They were planning to get conservatorship, file the deed transfer, sell your house, and pay off Kozlov with the proceeds," Emily continued. "The rest would have been their inheritance. But when you cut them off and protected your assets..." "They can't pay," Patricia finished grimly, "and people like Kozlov don't accept excuses." Margaret vomited into the basin beside her bed, her body rejecting this new level of betrayal. Her own daughter had not just stolen from her, she'd potentially signed Margaret's death warrant. If Kozlov's people came looking for collateral... "There's more," Emily said quietly. "I found Sarah's real financial records, the ones she's been hiding from everyone, including Jason." She pulled out another document. Margaret's eyes widened as she read. Sarah had a secret bank account with $90,000 in it, money she'd been skimming from the amounts Margaret had given them over the years, telling Jason they needed more while hoarding the excess. "She's been playing everyone," Emily said. "Even Jason doesn't know about this account. She was planning to leave him once she got your full inheritance. There are emails with someone named Derek in California. She's been having an affair for 2 years." The betrayal multiplied exponentially. Every dimension of Margaret's relationship with her daughter had been a lie. Every "I love you," every hug, every moment she'd treasured, all calculated manipulation. Dorothy had to physically hold Margaret as she sobbed, her body shaking so violently the nurses rushed in to check her vitals. The heart monitor's erratic beeping filled the room like a funeral dirge. "We need to go to the FBI immediately," Patricia said. "This is beyond elder abuse now. This is fraud, forgery, money laundering, potentially racketeering if Kozlov's involved." Margaret's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. With shaking hands, she opened it. The message made her blood freeze. "Mrs. Thompson, we understand your daughter owes us money. She listed you as guarantor. We'll be visiting soon to discuss payment. VK." Victor Kozlov knew where she lived. "I need protection," Margaret gasped. "Federal protection. Witness protection. Something." Patricia was already on the phone with the FBI, while Emily pulled up more documents on her laptop. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm so sorry, but there's something else. Jason found out about Sarah's secret account an hour ago. He's on his way here." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Jason burst through the hospital room door, his face contorted with rage. Security was nowhere to be seen. He'd somehow bypassed them. "You," he pointed at Emily, "you destroyed everything. And you," he turned to Margaret, his eyes wild, "your daughter has been stealing from me, while I thought we were partners." "Get out," Dorothy commanded, moving protectively in front of Margaret's bed. She has 90,000 hidden away, Jason screamed. Money that could save us from Kozlov. But she won't give it up. Says it's her insurance policy for when you die. Margaret's nausea returned full force. Her daughter had called her own mother's death an event requiring an insurance policy. She never loved either of us, Jason continued, laughing maniacally. She's been using us both. You were the cash cow. I was the cover story for respectability while she planned her escape with Derek. Security, Patricia shouted into the hallway. Jason pulled out his phone, showing Margaret a video. It was Sarah, recorded without her knowledge, talking to someone off camera. Margaret recognized the voice. It was Barbara Lancaster, Jason's mother, recorded just hours ago. Of course I never loved her, Sarah's voice said clearly. Margaret? She's pathetic. Desperate for love after Dad died. So easy to manipulate. A few fake tears call her mom in that little girl voice, and she'd empty her bank account. The woman's so lonely she'd pay any price for the illusion of family. The video continued. And Jason? He's even more pathetic than his mother-in-law. Thinks he's some business genius when he can't even see I've been bleeding him dry. Once I get the old lady's money, either through conservatorship or her death, whichever comes first, I'm gone. Derek and I already have a place picked out in Malibu. Margaret couldn't breathe. The cardiac monitor's alarm shrieked as her heart rhythm became dangerously erratic. Nurses flooded the room, pushing everyone out as they worked to stabilize her. Through the chaos, she heard Jason's final words. Kozlov gave us 72 hours. That was 48 hours ago. Sarah ran. She took the 90,000 and disappeared. We're all dead if we don't find that money. As the medication pulled Margaret under, her last coherent thought was that her daughter hadn't just betrayed her, she'd betrayed everyone, leaving a trail of destruction that might consume them all. Margaret woke on Christmas Eve evening to find her hospital room transformed into a makeshift FBI command post. Agent Diana Holbrook, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair, sat beside her bed while two other agents worked on laptops near the window. Mrs. Thompson, I'm Agent Holbrook with the Elder Fraud Division. We've taken over your case. The situation has escalated beyond local jurisdiction. Her voice was professional but kind. Viktor Kozlov's involvement changes everything. Margaret tried to speak, but her throat was raw from the breathing tube they'd removed. Dorothy appeared with ice chips, her face haggard from 3 days without sleep. They found Jason, Dorothy whispered. He's in protective custody, cooperating fully. But Sarah, we believe your daughter is attempting to flee the country, Agent Holbrook continued. We tracked her to Chicago O'Hare 4 hours ago, but she never boarded her flight to Costa Rica. The 90,000 she withdrew has been converted to cryptocurrency. She's gone dark. Margaret's heart monitor beeped irregularly. Even now, even after everything, some primitive maternal part of her worried for Sarah's safety. The agent seemed to read her thoughts. Mrs. Thompson, I need you to understand something. Your daughter isn't just running from debt. The FBI has been investigating her for 6 months. This goes deeper than you know. Patricia entered the room with Emily, both looking shaken. Margaret, brace yourself. The FBI just showed us Sarah's real history. Agent Holbrook opened a file on her tablet. Your daughter has been running confidence schemes since college. You weren't her first victim, Mrs. Thompson. There was a widow in Duluth named Frances Chen. Sarah befriended her through a grief support group, posed as a surrogate daughter for 2 years, extracted $47,000 before Mrs. Chen discovered the truth. Margaret's entire body went cold. The nausea returned with vengeance as she realized her daughter wasn't just cruel, she was a professional predator. Then there was Harold Morrison in Rochester, the agent continued, an 80-year-old widower. Sarah convinced him she was his deceased son's secret daughter. $90,000 over 18 months. He died of a stroke when he discovered the truth. He died? Margaret gasped, her voice barely a whisper. The stress of the betrayal caused a massive cerebrovascular event. The medical examiner ruled it stress-induced, but couldn't prove deliberate harm. Agent Holbrook's expression was grim. Your daughter has left a trail of destroyed elderly victims across 3 states. You're the only one still alive to testify. Margaret vomited again, Dorothy holding the basin while Patricia rubbed her back. Her daughter was a serial predator, a monster who hunted the grieving and lonely. Every memory, Every moment of Sarah's childhood suddenly looked different, tainted, poisonous. Emily spoke up, her voice shaking. "There's something else." I found Sarah's laptop hidden in their apartment. She had files on 12 other potential targets. Elderly people she'd researched, their net worth, their vulnerabilities. She called it her retirement portfolio. "One of them was me," Dorothy said quietly. Everyone turned to stare. "I'm on her list. Notes about my husband's recent death, my loneliness, my financial situation." She was planning to befriend me after she finished with Margaret. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of monitors. Margaret felt something inside her shatter completely, not her heart this time, but something deeper. The last vestige of maternal love, perhaps, or the final illusion that somewhere inside Sarah was the child she'd raised. Margaret's phone, sitting on the bedside table, suddenly rang. Unknown number. Agent Holbrook nodded for her to answer, quickly attaching a recording device. "Hello?" Margaret's voice cracked. "Hello, Mother." Sarah's voice was different, cold, stripped of all pretense. "I hear you've been talking to the FBI. Sarah, where are you? You need to turn yourself in." Sarah laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Turn myself in? For what? Being smarter than you? For taking what you offered so freely?" "For destroying people's lives," Margaret said, finding strength in her anger. "Francis Chen. Harold Morrison. How many others, Sarah?" "Oh, so you know about them." Sarah sounded amused. "They were practice. You were supposed to be my masterpiece. 6 years of investment, and you ruined it all over one stupid Christmas invitation. You killed Harold Morrison. He killed himself with weakness, just like you're doing now. 2 cardiac events in a week? Really, Mother? How dramatic." Sarah's voice dripped contempt. "You always were pathetically emotional." Agent Holbrook was gesturing frantically, mouthing, "Keep her talking." "The woman I raised wouldn't do these things," Margaret said, tears streaming down her face. "The woman you raised never existed," Sarah replied flatly. "She was a character I played. Every hug, every I love you, every tear, all calculated for maximum return. You were so desperate for love after Dad died, so pathetically eager to believe. You made it easy." "When did you become this?" Margaret whispered. "Become? Mother? I was born this way. I just got better at hiding it. Remember when Whiskers died when I was 7? The cat you found at the bottom of the stairs? I pushed him. I wanted to see what death looked like up close." Margaret retched, dry heaving into the basin. Dorothy gasped audibly. Even Agent Holbrook looked disturbed. "The cancer scare when I was 16 that made you give me everything I wanted? Fake medical documents I created myself? The college roommate who died in a car accident that you comforted me through? She never existed. Every tragedy, every crisis that brought us closer and opened your wallet wider, all fiction." "You're sick," Margaret breathed. "I'm evolved," Sarah corrected. "While you cling to outdated concepts like love and family, I see the world clearly. People are resources. You were a particularly rich vein that I mined for 6 years. Nothing personal. Kozlov will find you," Margaret said desperately. "You can't run forever." Sarah's laugh was genuine this time. "Kozlov? Oh, Mother. There is no Kozlov." "Well, there is. But Jason doesn't owe him money." That was another story, designed to make you feel protective, to maybe shake loose some emergency funds. Jason's too stupid to realize I set the whole thing up. The room erupted in chaos. Agent Holbrook was barking orders into her radio while Emily frantically typed on her laptop. Another manipulation, another layer of lies. "Goodbye, Mother," Sarah said cheerfully. "Enjoy whatever time you have left. Try not to die too dramatically. It's so middle class." The line went dead. Margaret collapsed back against the pillows, her body finally giving in to the complete devastation. Her daughter hadn't just betrayed her, she had never existed at all. 33 years of love poured into an empty vessel that had done nothing but calculate its return on investment. The news of Margaret's 3rd cardiac episode had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. By Christmas morning, while Margaret lay sedated in the ICU, Dorothy had assembled an unlikely army in the hospital's family waiting room. Mrs. Harrison from 2 houses down, Robert and Linda Mitchell from across the street, Father Michael from Street. Catherine's church, where Margaret had volunteered for decades, and surprisingly, George Patterson, the curmudgeonly retired judge who lived at the end of the block. "This ends now," Judge Patterson declared, his 80-year-old frame still commanding despite the walker he leaned on. "I've watched Margaret Thompson pour her heart and soul into that ungrateful child for 33 years. No more." Dorothy had called this emergency meeting after Agent Holbrook revealed they'd lost Sarah's trail completely. She'd vanished with the 90,000, leaving behind a wake of destruction and a mother fighting for her life. "What can we even do, Mrs.?" Harrison asked, wringing her hands. "If the FBI can't find her, we can make sure Margaret knows she's not alone," Father Michael said quietly. "And we can bear witness to what that monster has done." Linda Mitchell pulled out her phone. "I've been recording everything. Every time Sarah visited, which was rare, every time Margaret canceled plans to help them, every decline in Margaret's health and happiness. I have 3 years of documentation." "Why?" Dorothy asked, surprised. "Because I lost my mother the same way," Linda replied, her voice hard. "My brother bled her dry while telling everyone she was senile. By the time we realized what was happening, she'd lost everything and died believing she was a burden. I swore I'd never watch it happen again." The waiting room door burst open. Jason Lancaster stumbled in, looking haggard, unshaven, still wearing the same clothes from 3 days ago. FBI agent Holbrook followed closely behind. "He insisted on coming," the agent explained. "He has information about Sarah." Jason collapsed into a chair, his hands shaking. "She's not in Costa Rica. She never intended to go there. That was another lie, another misdirection." "Then where?" Dorothy demanded. "She's here. Still in Minneapolis. She's been here the whole time, watching, waiting." Jason's laugh was borderline hysterical. "She's staying with someone named Mitchell Stevens. I found the messages on our cloud backup. He thinks she's an abused wife fleeing a violent husband. Me. She's already started working him, telling him about her evil mother, who psychologically tortured her." Judge Patterson's face darkened. "Mitchell Stevens? The philanthropist? He's worth millions." "Here next, Mark," Agent Holbrook confirmed grimly. "We've been trying to reach him, but his staff says he's unavailable, celebrating Christmas privately with a special friend he met at a charity event last month." Dorothy felt sick. While Margaret lay dying, Sarah was already seducing her next victim, spinning tales of abuse to gain sympathy and access to another fortune. "There's more," Jason continued, his voice cracking. "She's been in the hospital. Here, she's been watching Margaret." Everyone froze. Agent Holbrook immediately got on her radio, calling for security sweeps of the building. "How?" Dorothy gasped. "She has a nurse's uniform. Her mother was a nurse. She knows exactly how to blend in. She's been in Margaret's room. The night nurse mentioned seeing a young nurse checking on Margaret who seemed very emotionally invested in her patient." Father Michael crossed himself. "Dear God, she could have killed her?" Jason finished. "That's exactly what she's waiting for. Natural death from stress means instant inheritance. She doesn't know about the will change yet." Dorothy ran for the ICU, the others following. They burst through the doors to find Margaret's room empty, except for a single nurse adjusting the IV drip. The nurse turned, and Dorothy's blood went cold. Sarah stood there in scrubs, her hair dyed black, wearing glasses, but unmistakably her. She smiled that same chilling smile from the doorstep confrontation. "Hello, Dorothy. Quite the gathering you've assembled." "Security," Agent Holbrook shouted. But Sarah held up a syringe near Margaret's fourth port. "Potassium chloride," Sarah said conversationally. "Enough to cause instant cardiac arrest, untraceable in someone with her current condition. The perfect murder." "You're insane," Dorothy breathed. "I'm practical," Sarah corrected. "Mother's dying anyway. 3 cardiac events in a week? She might last another day, maybe 2. Why prolong the suffering?" "Because she's your mother." Father Michael stepped forward. "The woman who loved you unconditionally." "Unconditional love is a myth," Sarah interrupted. "Everything has conditions. Everything is transactional. Margaret's love came with the condition that I play the devoted daughter. I did, for 33 years. Oscar-worthy performance, wouldn't you say?" Margaret's eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on her daughter. The heart monitor immediately began beeping faster. "Sarah?" Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. "You came back?" "To say goodbye, Mother," Sarah's tone was almost gentle. "You're going to have another cardiac event. Fatal this time. The stress of my betrayal, the horror of learning what I really am. It's all too much for your weak heart." "Please," Margaret gasped. "I loved you. I still—" "No," Sarah said firmly. "You loved an illusion, a character I created. The real me? You'd have drowned me in the bathtub if you'd known what I was at age 5. Jason suddenly lunged forward, knocking the syringe from Sarah's hand. It shattered on the floor as Agent Holbrook and security swarmed Sarah, forcing her to the ground. "Sarah Thompson Lancaster, you're under arrest for attempted murder, elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy," Agent Holbrook declared as she handcuffed her. Sarah laughed even as they dragged her away. "It doesn't matter. She's dying anyway. The stress I've caused is killing her. I still win." Margaret's monitor went wild, alarms shrieking as her heart rhythm became chaotic. Dr. Morrison rushed in with a crash team, pushing everyone out. Through the glass door, Dorothy watched them work frantically to save Margaret's life, while Sarah's laughter echoed down the hallway, the sound of pure evil celebrating its perceived victory. Patricia Chen Williams transformed the hospital conference room into a fortress of legal strategy. 3 laptops, 2 printers, and boxes of evidence covered every surface, while Margaret remained in critical condition just floors above. The December 27th morning brought an unexpected development that would change everything. "We have a problem," Agent Holbrook announced, entering with a grim expression. "Sarah's hired Marcus Rothstein." Patricia's coffee mug stopped halfway to her lips. Marcus Rothstein was known as the Demon's Advocate, a defense attorney who'd successfully defended the indefensible, turning monsters into martyrs through courtroom theatrics. Dorothy, who'd been organizing witness statements, looked up sharply. "How?" "She has no money." "We froze everything." "Mitchell Stevens," Agent Holbrook replied bitterly. "The philanthropist she was targeting. She convinced him she's a victim of elder abuse herself, that Margaret psychologically tortured her for decades, driving her to desperate actions. He's paying Rothstein's $200,000 retainer." Emily slammed her laptop shut in frustration. "She's doing it again. Even from jail, she's manipulating another victim." The door opened, and Jason entered with Barbara and Richard Lancaster. The formerly arrogant couple looked destroyed, Barbara's designer clothes replaced with simple clothing, Richard's commanding presence diminished to that of a broken old man. "We heard about Rothstein," Richard said quietly. "We want to help. Sarah destroyed our family too. Our son hasn't spoken to us since learning we participated in tormenting Margaret." "Your son is showing more integrity than you ever did," Dorothy said coldly. Barbara flinched but nodded. "We deserve that. But please, let us make amends. We have recordings of Sarah coaching us, planning every cruel word we said to Margaret." Patricia's phone rang. Dr. Morrison's voice was urgent. "Margaret's asking for you. All of you. She says it's important." They rushed to the ICU, finding Margaret propped up slightly, looking fragile but determined. Her voice was whisper-soft but clear. "I heard about Rothstein," she managed, each word an effort. "He'll paint me as the real abuser. Sarah as the victim." "Don't worry about that now," Patricia soothed. "No," Margaret insisted, her heart monitor beeping faster with her agitation. "I need to tell you something. About Sarah's childhood, something I never told anyone." Dorothy leaned closer, holding Margaret's hand. "When Sarah was 9, Margaret continued, struggling with each breath, her teacher called. 3 classmates' pets had died mysteriously. Sarah was the last to see each one. The teacher suspected, but couldn't prove. The room fell silent, except for the mechanical breathing of life support machines. Then when she was 13, Margaret's tears flowed freely. I found journals, detailed plans about how to hurt people without getting caught, studies of poison, manipulation techniques. I was terrified. Got her therapy. Dr. Amanda Reeves. 3 years of intensive treatment. If you find this part truly thought-provoking, go ahead and hit like to show your support. Do you feel the same way as the character in this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. "Where is Dr. Reeves now?" Agent Holbrook asked urgently. "Sarah destroyed her," Margaret whispered. When Dr. Reeves tried to have her institutionalized at 16, warning she was dangerous, Sarah accused her of inappropriate conduct. Fabricated evidence. Destroyed her career. Dr. Reeves lost her license. Her reputation. Everything. Patricia was already texting her investigator. "We need to find Dr. Reeves immediately." Margaret's breathing became more labored. "There's a safety deposit box, Union Bank, number 473. Everything's there. Sarah's journals, Dr. Reeves's reports, the teacher's letters. I kept it all, hoping I'd never need it, hoping love could fix her." "You documented everything?" Emily asked in amazement. "A mother's worst fear," Margaret gasped, "is admitting your child is a monster." But deeper down, I knew someday. I'd need proof. The key is in my jewelry box. The butterfly music box Sarah gave me for Mother's Day when she was 7. The last real gift. Before she became what she is. Dorothy retrieved the music box from Margaret's house within an hour. Inside, beneath the spinning ballerina, was a small key. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Sarah's innocent childhood gift hiding the evidence of her monstrous nature. At Union Bank, Patricia and Agent Holbrook opened Box 473 to find a heartbreaking archive, hundreds of pages documenting a mother's gradual realization that her daughter was a psychopath, photos of dead animals, journal entries in childish handwriting describing fantasies of watching people suffer, Dr. Reeves's increasingly urgent warnings. One letter from Dr. Reeves, dated just before Sarah destroyed her, was particularly chilling. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm begging you. Sarah is not capable of love. She mimics emotions she doesn't feel. She's studied you like a scientist studies a specimen, learning exactly how to manipulate your maternal instincts. She will destroy you if given the chance. Please, for your own safety, cut all contact when she turns 18. She's fooled everyone else, but her brain scans show no activity in areas associated with empathy. She's neurologically incapable of caring about anyone but herself." Patricia held up another document, a brain scan from when Sarah was 15, showing abnormal patterns consistent with severe antisocial personality disorder. "This changes everything," Agent Holbrook said. "This proves premeditation going back decades. Rothstein won't be able to claim temporary insanity or emotional distress." Back at the hospital, they found Margaret had taken another turn for the worse. But when Patricia whispered that they'd found the evidence, that Sarah's lifetime of deception would be exposed, Margaret's eyes opened. "Make sure," she whispered. "Everyone knows. I loved my daughter. I loved who I thought she was. That wasn't wrong. Love is never wrong. She was." Dr. Morrison checked Margaret's vitals with concern. "Her body's failing, but she's fighting. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. She needs to see this through." Patricia squeezed Margaret's hand. "We're going to destroy Rothstein and Sarah in court. Your evidence will save dozens of potential victims. You're a hero, Margaret." Margaret's lips moved. Not hero, just a mother, who finally faced the truth. The morning of December 28th brought chaos to the hospital. Emily Lancaster burst through the conference room doors, her face pale with shock, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Sarah's not who we think she is," she gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "I just got a call from someone named Derek Chen, the man Sarah was supposedly having an affair with in California." Patricia looked up sharply from her legal documents. "He's real?" "Very real, and very angry," Emily said, collapsing into a chair. "But not for the reasons we thought. He's not her lover. He's another victim she destroyed 15 years ago. His mother was Frances Chen, the widow in Duluth." The room went silent. Dorothy set down her coffee with trembling hands. "Derek's been hunting Sarah for 15 years, Emily continued. "When Frances died from the stress of Sarah's betrayal, Derek lost everything. His mother, his inheritance, his faith in humanity. He's been tracking Sarah's victims, documenting her crimes, building a case no one would listen to." Agent Holbrook immediately dialed a number. "We need Derek Chen here immediately." Within 3 hours, Derek arrived, a man in his 40s with haunted eyes and boxes of evidence. He set them on the table with the reverence of someone placing sacred artifacts. "Your daughter," he said, looking directly at the photo of Margaret on the wall, "destroyed my mother in 18 months. Frances Chen was a retired teacher, widowed, lonely. Sarah befriended her at grief counseling, became the daughter she'd always wanted. Mom died clutching a photo of Sarah, still believing she loved her, never knowing the $47,000 she'd given her was stolen through manipulation." Patricia opened the first box, finding meticulously organized files on 7 elderly victims across 5 states. Each folder contained photos, financial records, and heartbreaking final letters from victims still professing love for Sarah, even as she destroyed them. Harold Morrison in Rochester, Derek continued, his voice thick with emotion, died of a stroke when he discovered Sarah had been posing as his granddaughter. Martha Williams in Des Moines. Sarah convinced her she had dementia, isolated her from family, drained her accounts. She died alone in a nursing home, believing her real family had abandoned her. Dorothy had to excuse herself, overcome by nausea. Through the conference room window, they could see her retching in the hallway trash can. "But here's what changes everything," Derek said, pulling out a flash drive. "I've been in contact with Sarah's roommate from college, Rebecca Morrison. She just sent me this." He plugged the drive into Patricia's laptop. A video file opened, showing a young Sarah, maybe 19, speaking directly to the camera. The date stamp showed 2006. "Video diary, entry 43, young Sarah said with chilling casualness. "Mom still thinks Dad had a heart attack. The potassium chloride worked perfectly, mimicked natural cardiac arrest. The beauty is, she'll never suspect her loving daughter. I even cried at the funeral, practiced for hours in the mirror to get it right. Mom bought it completely. Now she's all mine to milk until she dies." Margaret's image appeared on the screen behind Sarah, a photo from Tom's funeral, Margaret sobbing while teenage Sarah stood beside her, dry-eyed despite her performed grief. "The long game is working," Sarah continued in the video. "I figure I can extract at least $200,000 over the next decade, maybe more if I play the struggling young adult perfectly. Mom's love is her weakness. Every hug, every I love you is an investment in my future wealth." Jason, who'd been silent in the corner, suddenly spoke. "There's something else. Sarah kept trophies." Everyone turned to stare at him. "In our apartment, she has a hidden compartment in the bedroom closet. She thinks I don't know about it. Inside are items from each victim, jewelry from Frances Chen, Harold Morrison's war medals, reading glasses from other victims. She would take them out sometimes and just stare at them, like a serial killer with souvenirs." Agent Holbrook was already dispatching units to retrieve the evidence when Dr. Morrison rushed in. "Margaret's conscious and demanding to speak with everyone. She says it's urgent." They found Margaret propped up slightly, her face gray but eyes burning with determination. When she saw Derek Chen, tears immediately began flowing. "You're Frances's son," she whispered. "Sarah mentioned you. Said you were bothering her mother, trying to steal her money." Derek's own eyes filled with tears. "She isolated my mother from me, convinced her I was after her inheritance. Mom died believing I was a monster, while the real monster held her hand." Margaret's sob was primal, her body convulsing with grief. How many others did my daughter destroy? "That we know of?" 12 confirmed victims over 15 years, Derek replied quietly. 7 died from stress-related conditions after discovering her betrayal. 3 died in nursing homes, alone and confused, believing their families had abandoned them. 2 survived but lost everything. Margaret vomited into the basin Dorothy held, her body rejecting the horror of what her daughter truly was. The cardiac monitor's alarm shrieked as her heart rhythm became dangerously erratic. "There's more," Derek said urgently, as nurses rushed in. Rebecca Morrison didn't just receive packages for Sarah, she helped her research victims. They had a partnership. Rebecca would identify lonely elderly people through her job at an insurance company, and Sarah would move in for the kill. Rebecca got 20% of whatever Sarah extracted. Margaret's eyes rolled back as she went into full cardiac arrest. As the medical team worked frantically to save her, Derek placed a final document on the table, a list of 30 more names, potential victims Sarah had been researching, with Margaret Thompson circled in red and marked, the ultimate score, motherlode. The monster hadn't just killed her father and destroyed countless lives. She'd been planning Margaret's destruction for decades, seeing her own mother as the biggest prize of all. The medical team worked for 27 minutes to bring Margaret back. 27 minutes that felt like lifetimes to Dorothy, who stood pressed against the ICU window, watching her friend die and return, balanced on the knife's edge between worlds. When Dr. Morrison finally emerged, her scrubs soaked with sweat, her face told the story before her words. She's stable, but barely. Her heart is failing. We're looking at days, maybe hours. Patricia's phone rang immediately. Agent Holbrook with urgent news. We found Rebecca Morrison. She's been in federal custody in Portland for the last 6 months on unrelated fraud charges. She's willing to testify against Sarah in exchange for immunity on those charges. Bring her here, Patricia commanded. Today. By evening, Rebecca Morrison sat in the conference room, a woman in her 40s whose hard features spoke of a life lived in moral shadows. She looked nothing like the grieving daughter Derek had imagined killed his mother. Let me be clear, Rebecca began, her voice emotionless. I'm not here for redemption. I'm here because Sarah betrayed me first. She was supposed to wire me my percentage from the Thompson score, $80,000. Instead, she disappeared with everything. Dorothy's hands clenched into fists. You helped her destroy innocent people for money? I identified marks, Rebecca corrected coldly. Sarah did the destroying. I just provided information from insurance databases. Who had money, who was vulnerable, who had no close family watching. Derek Chen leaned forward, his voice deadly quiet. You identified my mother. Rebecca met his gaze without flinching. Frances Chen, widow, $700,000 in assets, one estranged son, perfect mark. She paused, then added with something that might have been regret, I didn't know Sarah would push them so hard they'd die. I thought it was just about money. Just about money? Father Michael's voice shook with rage. These were people's lives, their final years stolen. Spare me the sermon, Father, Rebecca interrupted. I'm here to bury Sarah, not to seek absolution. You want her locked away forever? I have what you need. She pulled out an external hard drive. Everything. 15 years of communications, planning documents, victim research, financial records. Sarah kept meticulous records of every score, every manipulation tactic that worked, every dollar extracted. Patricia plugged in the drive, and the screen filled with folders, each labeled with a victim's name. Margaret Thompson's folder was the largest, containing subfolders spanning 20 years. Open the video folder in Margaret's file, Rebecca instructed. The first video was dated December 15, 2004. A 15-year-old Sarah speaking to the camera in what looked like Margaret's basement. Project Mother, Video Log 1, teenage Sarah said with disturbing composure. Dad's getting suspicious. He found my chemistry supplies. Tomorrow I implement the contingency plan. Potassium chloride in his coffee. Triggered cardiac arrest. Mom will be devastated, completely dependent on me for emotional support. Estimated extraction timeline. 20 years, $2 million minimum. Dorothy ran to the bathroom, the sound of her violent retching echoing through the conference room door. Emily held Derek's hand as tears streamed down his face. Tears for all the victims, for Margaret, for the father Sarah had murdered. The next video was from Tom Thompson's funeral. Sarah had hidden a camera in her purse, recording Margaret's breakdown at the casket. Look at her, Sarah's voice whispered over the image of Margaret collapsing in grief, so weak, so pathetic. She'll give me anything now, anything to keep her last family member close. The investment in killing Dad will pay off exponentially. Jason stood abruptly. I can't. I married this monster. I slept beside her for 3 years. There's one more thing, Rebecca said, pulling out a sealed envelope. Sarah gave me this 5 years ago, told me to open it only if she was arrested, said it was insurance. Patricia opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter from Sarah. If you're reading this, I've been caught. Know this. Margaret Thompson deserved everything. She made me this way with her suffocating love, her desperate need to be needed. Every dollar I took was payment for having to pretend to love her back. Every tear she sheds is justice for the childhood she stole by making me her emotional support after Dad died. I was 14, not her therapist. She turned me into a monster by forcing me to be her everything. I just monetized what she created. The cruel revisionism, the victim blaming, the complete lack of accountability, It was sociopathy in its purest form. Margaret's voice suddenly crackled through the intercom Patricia had set up so she could listen from her bed. "Bring Rebecca here." Dr. Morrison protested, but Margaret insisted. They wheeled Rebecca into the ICU under heavy guard. Margaret, gray and dying, looked at the woman who'd helped destroy so many lives. "Why?" Margaret whispered. "Why her? Why Sarah?" Rebecca studied Margaret for a long moment. Because she was perfect. Beautiful, charming, completely without conscience. She could make anyone believe she loved them while calculating their worth down to the penny. "Your daughter was born without a soul, Mrs. Thompson. I just showed her how to profit from it." Margaret's tears came silently. "She killed Tom?" "Yes. She never loved me. She's incapable of love. All those years, all those moments." "Performance art," Rebecca said with brutal honesty. She practiced her reactions in the mirror, studied videos of genuine emotions to mimic them. "Your daughter was never real, Mrs. Thompson. The Sarah you loved was a character she played." Margaret's monitors began alarming again, but she raised a weak hand to stop the nurses. "Thank you," she whispered to Rebecca. "For the truth." Rebecca stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, you were the only mark she ever seemed to hesitate about. Not from love, but from pragmatism. You were her most reliable source. She called you her golden goose and planned to keep you alive as long as possible." As Rebecca was escorted out, Margaret turned to Patricia with sudden clarity. "Use everything. Every video, every document. Don't let her charm another jury. Don't let her destroy anyone else." December 29th arrived with an unexpected visitor that would shake everyone's remaining faith in the system. Michael Rodriguez, the social worker who'd initially cleared Margaret weeks ago, returned to the hospital with a deeply troubled expression and a thick folder marked confidential. "I need to speak with Mrs. Thompson immediately," he said to Patricia in the hallway. "I've discovered something about Sarah's history that should have prevented this entire tragedy." Patricia led him to the conference room where Dorothy, Derek, Emily, and Agent Holbrook had assembled. Margaret watched through the video link from her ICU bed, too weak to be moved but insisting on hearing everything. Michael's hands trembled as he opened the folder. "After Sarah's arrest, I did something I should have done initially. I pulled her complete social services history. What I found goes back 25 years. He pulled out a report dated 1997. Sarah Thompson, age 5. 3 separate reports from teachers about disturbing behavior. Killing classroom pets, manipulating other children into hurting themselves, showing no remorse when confronted. Dorothy gasped. "Margaret never knew?" "The reports were filed but never followed up," Michael continued, his voice heavy with institutional guilt. Budget cuts, overworked caseworkers, and Sarah's ability to charm adults. Each incident was dismissed as childhood curiosity. He turned to another page, age 8. A neighbor reported seeing Sarah push another child down the stairs, then comfort the injured child so sweetly that the parents praised her for being helpful. The neighbor was dismissed as a troublemaker. Through the video link, Margaret's weak voice crackled. "Mrs. Peterson. She tried to warn me. I thought she was just a bitter old woman who didn't like children." Michael pulled out a photograph that made everyone recoil. It showed a child's drawing, stick figures, but one was clearly being hurt by another, with Mommy written above the victim and ME above the attacker. "Sarah drew this in 2nd grade, Michael explained. Her teacher found a whole notebook of similar drawings hidden in her desk. The school psychologist recommended immediate intervention. The recommendation was never acted upon. Agent Holbrook was taking rapid notes. Why wasn't Child Protective Services more involved? Michael's expression darkened. Because Margaret Thompson was a model parent. Loving, attentive, providing excellent care. And Sarah was brilliant at playing the perfect daughter whenever officials were around. The system failed because we couldn't imagine such evil could exist in a child from a good home. He pulled out another document, this one from 2001, age 13. Sarah was caught stealing money from a church charity drive, $500 meant for homeless families. When confronted, she convinced everyone that she was being bullied and needed the money for protection. Margaret paid back every penny and got Sarah counseling. "Dr. Reeves," Patricia said quietly. "Yes, but before Dr. Reeves, there was Dr. Martin Holloway." Michael pulled out a psychiatric evaluation. His assessment was chilling. He wrote, "This child displays all markers of antisocial personality disorder. She is manipulative, lacks empathy, and shows signs of sadistic tendencies. Immediate residential treatment recommended." "What happened to that recommendation?" Derek demanded. "Sarah happened," Michael replied grimly. "She accused Dr. Holloway of inappropriate conduct during sessions. Nothing sexual, but enough to destroy his credibility. He lost his practice, moved to Canada. The accusations were later proven false, but by then Sarah had moved on to Dr. Reeves." Margaret's anguished sob echoed through the speaker. "She destroyed everyone who tried to help. Everyone who saw what she really was." Michael wasn't finished. "There's more. Sarah's high school had a suspicious pattern of students suffering accidents or misfortunes after conflicts with her. Jenny Martinez, who won a scholarship Sarah wanted, severe allergic reaction from unknown exposure to peanuts, nearly died. Marcus Webb, who rejected her romantic advances, his college applications mysteriously went missing, destroying his future. Emily had been searching her laptop. "I found Jenny Martinez. She's willing to testify. She says Sarah definitely put peanut oil in her lotion, knowing about her allergy." The room fell into stunned silence as the magnitude of Sarah's decades-long reign of terror became clear. She hadn't become a monster. She'd been born one, and the system designed to protect society had failed at every turn. Michael stood up, his professional composure finally cracking. "Mrs. Thompson, I owe you an apology. When Sarah and Jason first reported you, I should have investigated them, not you. The signs were all there in her history. I just didn't look." Through the video feed, Margaret's face was gray, tears streaming. 33 years. 33 years I loved a demon disguised as my daughter. Every memory is poisoned. Every photo is a lie. She killed Tom, destroyed our life, and I helped her by loving her. Dr. Morrison entered with devastating news. "Margaret's kidneys are failing. We need to discuss end-of-life care." "No," Margaret said with sudden strength. "Not yet. Not until she's sentenced. I need to see this through." Michael placed a final document on the table. "There's one more thing. I found Sarah's application for nursing school from 10 years ago. She wrote an essay about wanting to help elderly patients in their final moments, given what we now know." The implication was clear. Sarah had been planning to become a nurse to have access to vulnerable victims, following in her mother's professional footsteps, but for monstrous purposes. Agent Holbrook stood up. "We have enough to ensure she never sees freedom again. Multiple murders, attempted murders, fraud, elder abuse spanning decades." "But will it be enough for Marcus Rothstein?" Patricia worried. "He's the best defense attorney in the country." Margaret's voice came through the speaker, weak but determined. "Then we give him something he can't defend against. The truth, all of it. Every victim, every crime, every destroyed life. Let the jury see what I created, what I enabled through my blind love." The December 30th morning brought a revelation that would change the entire legal landscape of the case. Robert Christensen, Margaret's financial advisor, arrived at the hospital with documents that had been locked in a vault for 19 years, documents even Margaret had forgotten existed. "Mrs. Thompson," he said gently through the video link to her ICU room, "your husband Tom established something before his death that Sarah never knew about. A trust fund that couldn't be accessed until specific conditions were met." Margaret's weak voice crackled through the speaker. "Tom never mentioned any trust. He created it 3 days before his death," Robert explained, his voice heavy with significance. "The same day he wrote those journal entries about Sarah. He knew something was wrong. He protected you from beyond the grave." If this part really struck a chord with you, tap that like button to let me know you're with me. Do you see yourself in the character's journey? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I can't wait to hear your take. Patricia leaned forward, studying the documents. "This trust contains $500,000? $547,000 with accumulated interest," Robert confirmed. "But here's the crucial part. It has an unusual clause. The trust only activates if Sarah is convicted of a crime against Margaret or if Margaret formally disowns her through legal channels." Dorothy gasped. Tom knew. He knew what Sarah was and tried to protect Margaret's future. Robert pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. He left this letter, to be opened only when the trust conditions were met. With shaking hands, Patricia opened the envelope and read Tom's words aloud. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, then my worst fears about Sarah have come true. I'm writing this 3 days before what I suspect might be my last day on Earth. Our daughter is not what she seems. She's dangerous, calculating, and I believe capable of murder. I've watched her manipulate you, studied her behavior, seen the coldness behind her performed affection. The sleeping pills in your tea were just the beginning. I found research on untraceable poisons in her room, hidden behind false panels she didn't know I'd discovered. This trust is my final gift to you, a chance at life free from her destruction. Use it to rebuild, to heal, to find real love from people who don't see you as a resource to be exploited. Please forgive me for not protecting you better. If I'm gone when you read this, know that I died loving you completely and that my last thoughts were of keeping you safe. Forever yours, Tom. Margaret's anguished wail through the speaker shattered everyone in the room. The cardiac monitor's alarms shrieked as her fragile heart struggled with this final revelation of love from beyond the grave. He knew he was going to die, Margaret sobbed. He knew she would kill him, and instead of running, he spent his last days protecting me financially. Agent Holbrook immediately called the district attorney. We need to add premeditated murder charges immediately. This letter proves Tom Thompson knew his life was in danger from his daughter. But the revelations weren't over. Robert pulled out another document. There's more. Tom also hired a private investigator to follow Sarah for the week before his death. The investigator, retired Detective James Murphy, is still alive. He's been waiting 19 years to tell his story. Within 2 hours, James Murphy, now in his 70s, entered the conference room with a box of evidence that had been sitting in his storage unit for nearly 2 decades. Tom Thompson hired me on March 13, 2005, Murphy began, his voice gravelly with age, said his daughter was dangerous, and he needed proof. What I found in 1 week of surveillance still gives me nightmares. He pulled out photographs. Sarah at 14, meeting with older teenagers known for drug dealing. Sarah purchasing chemicals from a garden store. Sarah testing substances on stray cats in an abandoned lot. But this was the worst, Murphy said, pulling out a final photo. It showed Sarah at Tom's office building the day before his death, tampering with his car in the parking garage. Emily gasped. She was setting up a backup plan? She put something in his brake fluid, Murphy confirmed. If the poison didn't work immediately, the brake failure would have finished him on his drive home. Tom Thompson was dead the moment he left his house that morning. He just didn't know it yet. Derek Chen had been silently reviewing financial records on his laptop. Suddenly, he looked up, his face pale. There's something else. Sarah knew about the trust. Everyone turned to stare at him. Look at this email she sent to Rebecca Morrison yesterday from jail. She mentions Dad's insurance policy and says she needs to eliminate the conditions to access it. With cough, Patricia's blood ran cold. Eliminate the conditions means kill Margaret before the conviction, Agent Holbrook finished. If Margaret dies before Sarah's convicted, the trust never activates. The money goes to Sarah as the sole heir. Through the video link, Margaret's voice was barely audible. She's still trying to kill me. Even from jail, even facing life in prison, she's still trying to complete her plan from 19 years ago. Dr. Morrison rushed in with urgent news. Margaret's condition is deteriorating rapidly. The stress of these revelations. Her body can't take much more. We need to put her into a medically induced coma to preserve what function remains. Wait, Margaret gasped. I need to record my testimony. For the trial. In case I don't. Patricia immediately set up video equipment. Margaret, gray and dying, looked directly into the camera with the last of her strength. My name is Margaret Thompson. I am 72 years old. My daughter Sarah killed my husband Tom 19 years ago. She has spent my entire life's savings. She has destroyed countless innocent elderly people, and despite all of this, I need to say something for the record. December 31st arrived with the preliminary hearing that would determine if Sarah would stand trial for murder, attempted murder, and dozens of counts of elder fraud. The courtroom was packed with victims' families, media, and those who'd followed the horrifying story of a daughter who'd murdered her father and spent decades destroying her mother. Margaret watched from her hospital bed, too weak to attend but connected via video link. The court had made special accommodations, understanding that the key witness might not survive to the actual trial. Sarah entered in an orange jumpsuit, her appearance shocking those who'd known her as the polished manipulator. Without her expensive clothes and careful grooming, she looked ordinary, almost harmless, which Patricia knew was her most dangerous disguise. Marcus Rothstein, her defense attorney, immediately moved for dismissal. "Your Honor, my client is a victim of a lifetime of psychological abuse. Margaret Thompson created a codependent relationship that destroyed Sarah's ability to form normal attachments." Prosecutor Diana Walsh stood up. "Your Honor, we have evidence of 17 victims across 5 states, including Sarah Thompson's own father, murdered when she was 14 years old." Judge Harrison, a veteran of 30 years on the bench, reviewed the evidence with growing horror. When Diana played Sarah's video confession about killing Tom, several people in the gallery had to leave, overcome by nausea. Sarah sat unmoved, studying her nails with the same detachment she might show watching a weather report. "Miss Thompson," Judge Harrison addressed her directly. "Do you have anything to say about these recordings?" Sarah looked up with those cold eyes that had fooled so many. "I was a child exploring dark thoughts. Every teenager has violent fantasies. These were artistic expressions, nothing more." Diana played the next recording. Sarah at 19 discussing her extraction timeline for Margaret's money. Sarah's expression never changed. "That was clearly a joke taken out of context," Sarah said smoothly. Dark humor to cope with the pressure of caring for an emotionally demanding mother. Derek Chen was called to testify about his mother Frances. As he described finding his mother dead, clutching a photo of Sarah while Sarah had already emptied her accounts, Sarah actually yawned. The moment that changed everything came when Emily took the stand. She pulled out a tablet and showed a live feed from Sarah's jail cell recordings from that morning. "I had a contact at the jail send me this," Emily explained. Sarah was talking to her cellmate, not knowing she was being recorded. The recording played, Sarah's voice clear and casual. "The old witch is dying anyway. If she croaks before the trial, I inherit everything. Tom set up some trust fund, but it only kicks in if I'm convicted. 500 grand just waiting. All I need is for Margaret to die in the next few days, and even if I go to prison, I'll have money waiting when I get out." The courtroom erupted. Even Marcus Rothstein looked shocked. Sarah's mask finally slipped, her face contorting with rage as she realized she'd been caught in her own words yet again. Margaret's voice came through the video link, weak but clear. "Your Honor, may I address the court?" "Please proceed, Mrs. Thompson. For 33 years, I loved a fiction. The daughter I thought I had never existed. The real Sarah killed my husband, destroyed my life, and devastated dozens of other families. But I need to say this. I forgive her." Sarah's head snapped up, genuine surprise flickering across her face for the first time. "I forgive her," Margaret continued, "not because she deserves it, but because I refuse to die carrying the poison of hatred she planted in my life. She took my husband, my money, my health, and my faith in humanity. But she cannot take my ability to choose love over hate in my final days." Sarah laughed, a harsh sound that made everyone flinch. "How pathetically noble, Mother. Still trying to be the martyr even while dying." Judge Harrison had heard enough. "Sarah Thompson, you are hereby bound over for trial on all charges, including first-degree murder. Bail is denied. You will remain in custody." As court officers moved to escort Sarah out, she turned to the camera connecting to Margaret's room. "You're going to die alone, Mother. Just like Dad did. Choking on your own fluids, terrified knowing your daughter orchestrated it all." Margaret's response was barely a whisper but carried through the courtroom. "I'm not alone. I have real family now, people who love me without price tags. You're the one who's alone, Sarah. You always have been, trapped in the prison of your own empty soul." Sarah lunged toward the camera, but officers restrained her. As they dragged her away, her final words echoed. "I should have killed you years ago, should have put you in the ground with Dad." The confession to attempted murder, delivered in front of a packed courtroom, sealed her fate. Back in the hospital, Margaret's monitors began their final alarm. Dorothy held one hand, Patricia the other, as Margaret Thompson smiled for the first time in weeks. "I'm free," she whispered. "Finally free." But she held on, determined to see this through to the end. The trial would begin in 3 days. Margaret had 3 days to survive, to ensure Sarah could never hurt anyone again. January 2nd brought the start of the trial that would captivate the nation. Margaret had survived against all medical odds, her body sustained by sheer will and a cocktail of medications that Dr. Morrison called a medical miracle wrapped in stubbornness. The prosecution's first witness was Dr. Amanda Reeves, Sarah's former psychiatrist. Despite the years of hiding after Sarah destroyed her career, she took the stand with quiet dignity. Sarah Thompson is a psychopath in the clinical sense, Dr. Reeves testified. She lacks the neurological capacity for empathy. Brain scans from when she was 15 showed no activity in the regions associated with emotional bonding or remorse. Marcus Rothstein attacked immediately. Dr. Reeves, isn't it true you lost your license after inappropriate conduct with patients? I lost my license after Sarah Thompson fabricated evidence against me when I tried to have her institutionalized, Dr. Reeves replied calmly. She destroyed my career because I saw what she was and tried to protect society from her. The prosecution presented Sarah's own recordings, her teenage voice describing the murder of her father with the casual tone of someone discussing a grocery list. Several jurors visibly recoiled. Mitchell Stevens took the stand next, the 80-year-old philanthropist Sarah had been targeting. His testimony was devastating. She told me her mother was a monster who'd psychologically tortured her, he said, voice shaking with rage at being deceived. I gave her $200,000 for her legal defense. She cried in my arms, called me the father she'd never had. It was all performance. Sarah watched from the defendant's table, occasionally rolling her eyes or examining her fingernails. Her lack of concern was more damaging than any testimony. On day 2, Jason Lancaster testified for the prosecution, granted immunity for his cooperation. Living with Sarah was like living with a robot programmed to mimic human emotion, he testified. She'd practice facial expressions in the mirror. She had notebooks rating which emotional displays yielded the best results. Our entire marriage was her calculating how to extract maximum value from Margaret. But you participated, Rothstein pointed out. You benefited from Margaret's money. I did, Jason admitted. I thought I was the con artist in our relationship. I didn't realize until too late that Sarah was playing me too, that I was just another tool in her arsenal against Margaret. The most powerful testimony came from the victims' families. Derek Chen spoke about his mother Frances, how Sarah had isolated her, convinced her that her own son was evil, drained her accounts, and left her to die believing she was unloved. Harold Morrison's daughter testified about finding her father after his stroke, clutching the fake granddaughter documents Sarah had created, still believing this stranger was family, even as his heart failed from the betrayal. Martha Williams' son described finding his mother in a nursing home, convinced her family had abandoned her, not knowing Sarah had intercepted all their calls and letters while draining her life savings. Each story was the same pattern: isolation, manipulation, financial extraction, and devastating aftermath. By the time 12 victims' families had testified, several jurors were crying. On day 3, the prosecution played Sarah's jail recordings. Her casual discussion of hoping Margaret would die before the trial, her calculation of the trust fund money, her complete lack of concern for anyone but herself. Then came the moment everyone had waited for. Margaret Thompson, connected via video from her hospital bed, was sworn in to testify. She looked skeletal, kept alive by machines, but her voice was clear. For 33 years, I loved someone who didn't exist. The daughter I thought I had was a character Sarah performed. The real Sarah killed my husband when she was 14 because he discovered what she was. Mrs. Thompson. Prosecutor Walsh asked gently, "Do you believe Sarah planned to kill you?" Yes. She had a timeline. I was supposed to die at 75, making it look natural. When I cut off the money, she accelerated her plan. The stress-induced cardiac events were intentional. She knew exactly what buttons to push to literally break my heart. Rothstein stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Thompson, isn't it true you were an overbearing mother who made Sarah dependent on you? Margaret's response was devastating in its simplicity. Mr. Rothstein, I have 43 Mother's Day cards from Sarah in my closet. Would you like me to read them? Each one professes love, gratitude, devotion. Each one was a lie. written by someone incapable of feeling any of those emotions, designed to keep the money flowing. I wasn't overbearing. I was a mark being worked by a professional predator who happened to share my DNA. Sarah suddenly stood up, ignoring her attorney's attempts to stop her. You want to know the truth, Mother? You were pathetically easy. A few tears, a hug, and I love you, and you'd empty your accounts. You killed Dad with your weakness. He died trying to protect you from yourself. The courtroom erupted. Judge Harrison pounded his gavel as Sarah continued her rant. Every old fool I destroyed was just practice for you, Sarah screamed. You were going to be my masterpiece, my retirement fund. $2 million over 20 years, carefully extracted while you withered away believing your daughter loved you. As guards restrained her, Sarah's mask completely shattered, revealing the monster beneath. I should have put digitalis in your coffee, too. Should have watched you die like I watched him die. Choking, gasping, reaching for help that would never come. The confession to Tom's murder, delivered in open court, sealed her fate irrevocably. Margaret's final words to the court were, I forgive her, not for her sake but for mine. I choose to die with love in my heart, not the hatred she tried to plant there. The fourth day of the trial brought the most shocking revelation yet. Emily Lancaster arrived at the courthouse with an ashen face, clutching a USB drive she'd discovered hidden in a hollowed-out book in Sarah's apartment. I found something that changes everything, she told Prosecutor Walsh. Sarah didn't just record her victims, she recorded the murder. The courtroom fell silent as Emily was sworn in for additional testimony. This drive was hidden inside a fake book titled Grieving Together, a bereavement guide Sarah had hollowed out. Inside was a micro-camera's memory card from March 18, 2005, the day Tom Thompson died. Judge Harrison cleared the courtroom of media, allowing only the jury, attorneys, and immediate family to remain. Margaret watched from her hospital bed as the prosecution prepared to play the video. The footage was grainy but clear enough. 14-year-old Sarah in the kitchen at 5:40 in the morning, carefully measuring white powder into Tom's coffee mug. The camera, apparently hidden in a kitchen plant, captured her practiced movements. Tom entered the frame, dressed for work. Morning, sweetheart. You're up early. I wanted to make you coffee, Daddy, young Sarah's voice chirped sweetly. Special blend, just for you. The courtroom watched in horror as Tom drank the coffee, kissed his daughter's forehead, and gathered his briefcase. Sarah watched him leave, then turned to the camera with a smile that made several jurors gasp. Digitalis and potassium chloride, she said to the camera. Should kick in within an hour, massive cardiac arrest, untraceable unless they specifically test for it, which they won't. Grieving widow, traumatized daughter, no one suspects a 14-year-old of murder. The video continued for another 2 minutes as Sarah cleaned the mug, disposed of the powder containers in a neighbor's trash can, and then practiced crying in front of the hallway mirror. Daddy, she wailed at her reflection, then stopped, adjusted her expression, tried again. No, too much. Need to be shocked, not hysterical. She practiced different versions of grief until settling on one that looked heartbreakingly genuine. Margaret's anguished cry through the video link pierced the courtroom. Dr. Morrison's voice could be heard off-screen ordering increased sedation as Margaret's heart rate spiked dangerously. Sarah, sitting at the defendant's table, watched her younger self with what appeared to be pride. Is this real? Judge Harrison asked, visibly shaken. An FBI tech expert took the stand. We've analyzed the footage extensively. It's authentic, recorded on a camera that was reported stolen from an electronics store 2 days before Tom Thompson's death. The metadata is consistent with the date and time. Prosecutor Walsh stood slowly. Your Honor, we'd like to add premeditated murder in the first degree with special circumstances, murder for financial gain by a minor. Rothstein, for the first time in his career, seemed at a loss. Your Honor, I need to confer with my client. Sarah fired him on the spot. You're useless, she said flatly. I'll represent myself. Judge Harrison warned her against it, but Sarah insisted. Her self-representation would become legendary in legal circles for its complete disconnect from reality. This video proves nothing except that I was a troubled child exploring dark fantasies, Sarah began, standing to address the jury. The person in that video isn't me, it's a character I was playing, method acting for a school drama project about grief. Prosecutor Walsh pulled out school records. There was no drama project. You weren't even enrolled in drama class. Sarah pivoted without missing a beat. Then clearly I was having a psychotic break. Temporary insanity brought on by my mother's suffocating love. The same mother you called a cash cow in multiple recordings? Walsh countered. Delusions, Sarah said smoothly. I believed she was controlling me with her money. Walsh played another video from the USB drive. Sarah at 16, recording herself reviewing her portfolio of elderly targets, rating them by vulnerability and net worth. More delusions, Sarah insisted. I was clearly suffering from severe mental illness that my mother ignored. Derek Chen couldn't contain himself from the gallery. You killed my mother. She died believing her son hated her because of your lies. Sarah turned to him with dead eyes. Your mother was weak. She wanted to believe someone loved her so badly that she ignored every red flag. Natural selection at work. The jury's expressions hardened. Sarah had just destroyed any possibility of sympathy. Judge Harrison called a recess. When they reconvened, Margaret had a request delivered through Patricia. She wants to show something to the court, Patricia explained, holding up a small photo album. These are pictures of Tom's funeral. The photos were entered into evidence. Image after image of 14-year-old Sarah at her father's funeral, standing dry-eyed beside her sobbing mother, occasionally patting Margaret's shoulder in performed comfort. But the last photo was the most chilling, Sarah taking a selfie at the cemetery, smiling slightly, with her father's casket visible in the background. On the back, in Sarah's teenage handwriting, Freedom Day, March 21, 2005, Phase 1 complete. The trial was effectively over. The jury had seen a monster document her own evolution, from patricide to serial elder abuse to attempted matricide. As court adjourned, Sarah made one final statement. When she dies, and she will die, I want my inheritance. Every penny. I earned it playing her pathetic daughter for 33 years. Margaret's voice came through the video link, stronger than it had been in days. You'll get exactly what you deserve, Sarah. Nothing. You were written out of my will the day you said I wasn't special enough for Christmas. Everything goes to a charity for elder abuse victims. Your legacy will be saving the people you tried to destroy. Sarah's scream of rage followed the jury out of the courtroom. January 5th brought a dramatic turn that no one anticipated. Sarah Thompson collapsed in her cell at 4 a.m, convulsing violently. The prison medical team rushed her to the hospital, ironically, the same hospital where Margaret lay dying. Dr. Morrison faced an ethical dilemma as Sarah was wheeled into the emergency room. We have to treat her, she told the assembled team, though her expression showed her internal struggle. Put her in the secure wing, away from Margaret. But Sarah had other plans. As soon as she regained consciousness, she began screaming, I want to see my mother. I'm dying. I have the right to see her. The medical tests revealed something unexpected. Sarah had somehow ingested antifreeze while in custody. Not enough to kill immediately, but enough to cause organ failure over several days. Agent Holbrook arrived within minutes. This is impossible. She's been in solitary confinement. No access to any chemicals. The investigation revealed the truth within hours. Sarah had convinced another inmate, Teresa Valdez, to smuggle in antifreeze in exchange for legal advice. Sarah had been slowly poisoning herself for 3 days. Why? Patricia asked when she arrived at the hospital. The jury hasn't even begun deliberations. Sarah, restrained to her bed but fully conscious, smiled that chilling smile. Because if I die before conviction, the trust fund provisions aren't met. Mother dear still has me as her beneficiary in her original will. If we both die, everything goes to my designated recipient. You don't have a designated recipient, Patricia said. Oh, but I do, Sarah replied. A charity I established 5 years ago. Second Chances Foundation for Troubled Youth. Guess who the sole board member is? Rebecca Morrison. And guess what our arrangement was? 70-30 split. Even facing death, Sarah was still scheming. She'd poisoned herself to trigger a legal loophole that would still get her money to her accomplice. If this moment truly hit home for you, don't forget to tap that like button. It tells me you're right here with me. Can you see a bit of yourself in this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what part spoke to you most. Dorothy burst into the room. Margaret knows. She's demanding to see Sarah. Absolutely not, Dr. Morrison said. Margaret's hanging by a thread. The shock could kill her. But Margaret's voice came through the hospital intercom. She'd convinced a nurse to patch her through. Bring her to me. I need to face this. Against all medical advice, they wheeled Sarah into Margaret's ICU room, both women dying, both connected to machines, facing each other for what would be the last time. Margaret spoke first, her voice barely a whisper. You poisoned yourself to rob me even in death? I learned from the best, Sarah replied coldly. You taught me that love means sacrifice. I'm sacrificing myself to ensure my legacy. You have no legacy, Margaret said. I changed my will this morning. Emergency video conference with my lawyer. Everything goes to Derek Chen's Foundation for Elder Abuse Victims. Your fake charity gets nothing. For the first time in the entire ordeal, Sarah showed genuine rage. You can't do that. I'm your daughter. No, Margaret said firmly. My daughter died the day she killed her father. You're just the monster wearing her face. Sarah tried to lunge from her bed but was too weak. I should have killed you slowly. Should have made you suffer for years. You did, Margaret replied. Every day since Tom died has been agony, wondering what I did wrong. But I know now. I did nothing wrong. You were born broken. I loved you anyway. That wasn't a weakness. It was my humanity. Sarah's monitors began alarming. The antifreeze was causing kidney failure faster than expected. As medical staff rushed in, Sarah managed one final cruelty. I killed 3 others you never knew about, she gasped. Mrs. Brennan from your church, Mr. Jacobson from the senior center, Mrs. Park from your book club. Check the obituaries from 2015. All heart attacks within 6 months, all after changing their wills to include me. Margaret's own monitors spiked dangerously. Dorothy grabbed her hand as she began convulsing. That's 6 murders, Derek Chen shouted from the doorway. 6 innocent people plus your father? Sarah smiled even as her body failed. 7. Don't forget the baby. Everyone froze. What baby? Patricia demanded. I was pregnant at 19, Tom's grandchild. Terminated it because a baby would have interfered with my timeline for extracting money. Told mother it was a miscarriage. She grieved for months. That was the final blow. Margaret's heart, already damaged beyond repair, simply stopped. The medical team worked frantically, but after 15 minutes, Dr. Morrison called time of death. January 5th, 4:43 p.m. Sarah lived another 6 hours, long enough to learn that her mother had died, that her scheme had failed, that she would be remembered only as a monster who destroyed everyone who loved her. Her last words spoken to the empty room were, I won. She died believing I destroyed everything she loved. That's worth more than money. But she was wrong. Margaret had died surrounded by Dorothy, Derek, Emily, and others who'd become her true family. She died knowing she'd stopped Sarah from hurting anyone else. She died having chosen love over hatred. Sarah Thompson died alone at 11:17 p.m., her body finally succumbing to her own poison. No one mourned, no one cried. The nurse who pronounced her death would later say it was the only time she'd felt relief at losing a patient. The funeral home director who handled Sarah's body found something chilling. She'd tattooed a number on her inner wrist, $1,847,000. The total amount she'd calculated she could have extracted from all her victims if she'd succeeded. Even in death, Sarah Thompson measured her worth in dollars stolen rather than lives touched. 2 days after both Margaret and Sarah were buried, Margaret with hundreds of mourners, Sarah with only the state-mandated minimum, Patricia called an emergency meeting. She'd discovered something while executing Margaret's estate that changed everything they thought they knew. Margaret left something in her safety deposit box that she added the morning she died, Patricia explained to the gathered group in her office. Dorothy, Derek, Emily, Father Michael, and even Jason assembled around the conference table. Patricia pulled out a sealed envelope marked, "To be opened only after both our deaths, Margaret Thompson." Inside was a handwritten letter in Margaret's shaky script, dated January 5th, just hours before her death. To those who truly loved me. If you're reading this, then both Sarah and I are gone. I need you to know something I've never told anyone, something that might explain everything or nothing at all. Sarah wasn't Tom's biological daughter. I was assaulted when Tom and I were briefly separated in 1971, before we married. I never told him. When I discovered I was pregnant, Tom had just returned, begging for reconciliation. I let him believe the baby was his. It was cowardly, but I was 21 and terrified. The man who assaulted me was Marcus Sullivan. I learned years later he was diagnosed as a violent psychopath, convicted of killing 3 women in California. He died in prison in 1995. I've carried this secret for 33 years, wondering if Sarah's evil came from him, if I cursed my daughter with poisoned DNA, but I also know this. Tom loved Sarah as his own. I loved her completely. We gave her every opportunity to be good. Nature or nurture, she chose evil. I'm telling you this now because Sarah died believing she'd won, that she'd destroyed me with her final revelations. But I knew about Mrs. Brennan, Mr. Jacobson, and Mrs. Park. I suspected for years but could never prove it. I stayed silent because admitting my daughter was a serial killer meant admitting I'd failed. But I didn't fail. I loved. In a world full of Sarah's calculated cruelty, choosing to love, even when it's betrayed, is not weakness. It's the only thing that separates us from the monsters. Sarah may have inherited evil, but she chose to embrace it. Every day she chose cruelty over kindness, manipulation over truth, greed over love. Those were her choices, not mine, not Tom's. Use the estate to help her victims. Let some good come from all this pain. And please, remember me not as the fool who enabled a monster, but as a mother who loved imperfectly but completely. Margaret. The room sat in stunned silence. Dorothy was crying quietly. Derek stared at the letter as if it might reveal more secrets. She knew, Emily whispered. She knew Sarah might be genetically predisposed to psychopathy and still chose to love her. Patricia pulled out another document. There's more. Margaret hired a private investigator in 2019 to research Marcus Sullivan. She knew about his crimes, his diagnosis, his death. She knew Sarah might have inherited his condition. Jason spoke for the first time. Does this change anything legally? No, Patricia replied. Sarah was convicted posthumously of 7 counts of murder yesterday. The jury deliberated for 12 minutes. But it changes how we understand Margaret's story. Father Michael stood slowly. Margaret Thompson spent 33 years loving someone incapable of love, knowing she might be raising a monster, choosing hope over fear every single day. That's not foolishness, that's courage. Derek pulled out his laptop. I've been documenting everything for the foundation. Margaret's story needs to be told, but not as a tragedy. As a warning, yes, but also as proof that love isn't weakness, even when it's weaponized against us. Dorothy added, Margaret died free. She forgave Sarah not for Sarah's sake but for her own. She chose to die with love in her heart rather than hatred. That's her real victory. Patricia revealed one final document. Margaret's estate, after all debts and funeral expenses, amounts to $1.3 million. She'd been living frugally for years, saving everything she could even while Sarah bled her. She wanted to make sure the victims' families were compensated. The Margaret Thompson Foundation for Elder Justice was established that day, with Derek Chen as its director. Within a year, it would help identify and prosecute dozens of cases of elder financial abuse. But perhaps Margaret's greatest legacy came from an unexpected source. Mitchell Stevens, the philanthropist Sarah had been targeting, donated $10 million to the foundation. Margaret Thompson saved my life, he said at the press conference. Her sacrifice exposed a predator who would have destroyed me and many others. 3 years later, Derek would receive a letter from a woman in Idaho. Her daughter had been showing signs of antisocial behavior, manipulation, and cruelty. The mother had read Margaret's story and sought help early. The daughter was in intensive therapy, showing improvement. Margaret's story gave me permission to see the truth about my child without stopping loving her, the woman wrote, but also to protect others from what she might become. That balance, love without enabling, saved us all. Margaret Thompson died believing she'd failed. In truth, her story would save hundreds of elderly victims and help families recognize and address dangerous behavior before it destroyed lives. Her gravestone bore the inscription she'd requested, Margaret Thompson. Mother. She chose love. Next to it, Sarah's state-provided grave marker simply read, Sarah Thompson, 1970, 2 to 2025. No one ever visited Sarah's grave. But Margaret's became a place of pilgrimage for those who'd survived elder abuse, who'd loved someone incapable of love, who'd chosen forgiveness over hatred. In death, Margaret had won the only victory that mattered. She remained human in the face of inhumanity. She chose love despite its cost. And Sarah? Sarah became what she'd always been, a cautionary tale, a warning, a reminder that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like our daughters. The posthumous verdict came down on January 8th, 3 days after both Margaret and Sarah had died. The jury's decision was unprecedented in Minnesota legal history. Sarah Thompson was found guilty on all counts: 7 murders in the first degree, 17 counts of elder fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Even in death, justice demanded an accounting. District Attorney Diana Walsh held a press conference on the courthouse steps, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd of victims' families and media. Sarah Thompson may have escaped earthly punishment through her own cowardice, but her legacy is now sealed. She will be remembered as one of the most prolific elder predators in American history. Her victims, however, will be remembered as people who loved and trusted, whose only crime was believing in human kindness. The courtroom had been packed for the verdict reading. Judge Harrison took the unusual step of allowing victim impact statements, even though the defendant was deceased. Derek Chen stood first. My mother died believing her son hated her. Sarah Thompson stole not just money, but my mother's final days of knowing she was loved. That theft can never be repaid. Martha Williams' son spoke next. Sarah Thompson isolated my mother so completely that Mom died thinking we'd abandoned her. She spent her last months alone, confused, believing the lies Sarah had planted. That cruelty goes beyond financial crime, it's emotional torture. But it was Dorothy's statement that resonated most powerfully. I'm not speaking as a victim, but as someone who witnessed Margaret Thompson's destruction in real time. I watched my friend age 20 years in 2 weeks. I held her as she discovered her daughter had murdered her husband, that her entire maternal life had been a performance piece for a psychopath. Yet Margaret chose forgiveness. Not for Sarah. Sarah was incapable of receiving forgiveness, but for herself. Margaret refused to die carrying the poison Sarah had tried to plant in her heart. After the verdict, Patricia met with the FBI to discuss something troubling they'd discovered in Sarah's belongings, a notebook labeled The Next Generation. Agent Holbrook explained, Sarah was developing a network. She'd been training others, teaching them her methods through encrypted forums. We've identified at least 12 individuals across the country who were following her tutorials on elder exploitation. The notebook contained detailed instructions: how to identify vulnerable targets, how to create emotional dependency, how to isolate victims from family, how to document everything to avoid prosecution. It was a serial predator's handbook. She was building a legacy of predators, Agent Holbrook continued. Even facing life in prison, she was trying to spread her evil. Emily, who'd been assisting with the investigation, made a connection. The Second Chances Foundation. Sarah's fake charity. It wasn't just for money laundering, she was recruiting through it. The investigation revealed Sarah had been in contact with troubled teenagers through the foundation, specifically seeking those who showed antisocial tendencies. She'd been grooming the next generation of elder predators. One teenager, Katie Morris from Des Moines, came forward. Sarah told me elderly people were parasites, hoarding resources while young people struggled. She said taking their money was evening the score. She made it sound like justice. Katie had been days away from implementing Sarah's plan on her own grandmother when news of Sarah's arrest broke. Seeing what she really was, what she'd done to her own mother, it woke me up. I almost became a monster because a monster convinced me it was normal. The Margaret Thompson Foundation immediately launched an intervention program, reaching out to every young person Sarah had contacted. 7 were already in various stages of exploiting elderly relatives. All were stopped, their potential victims saved. Patricia discovered something else while settling the estate. Sarah had hidden money in cryptocurrency accounts, nearly $200,000 skimmed from her various victims over the years. The recovery process would take months, but every penny would go to victim restitution. Jason, who'd been cooperating fully with authorities, revealed one final detail. Sarah kept recordings of everything, but there's one she made me promise never to mention. The night before Tom died, she recorded herself practicing her eulogy for his funeral. She knew exactly what she'd say, how she'd cry, where she'd pause for effect. She planned his funeral before she killed him. That recording was found hidden in a safety deposit box Sarah had opened under a false name. Watching 14-year-old Sarah rehearse grief for a father still alive, still trusting her, was so disturbing that several FBI agents had to leave the room. The medical examiner's final report on Sarah revealed something unexpected. The antifreeze she'd ingested had been mixed with something else, digitalis, the same poison she'd used on her father. She'd died the same way she'd killed Tom, a twisted form of poetic justice she'd inflicted on herself. She wanted to die like him, Dr. Morrison explained. Maybe to prove she could endure what she'd put him through, or maybe it was her final act of control. Even her death was calculated. Mitchell Stevens established the Tom Thompson Memorial Fund specifically for men who'd been victims of elder fraud, noting that Tom had been Sarah's first victim and deserved recognition. By January 15th, a week after the verdict, Margaret's house had been cleaned out for sale. Dorothy supervised the process, ensuring Margaret's personal items were handled with care. In Margaret's closet, behind the 43 Mother's Day cards Sarah had given her, each a calculated lie, Dorothy found something that broke her heart. A small box labeled Real Moments. Inside were photos Margaret had secretly marked, times she'd caught Sarah in unguarded moments, not performing, not manipulating. There were only 3 photos spanning 33 years. One showed infant Sarah sleeping, another, Sarah at age 2, laughing at a butterfly. The last, Sarah at 4, absorbed in drawing. Margaret had spent 3 decades searching for genuine moments from her daughter and found only 3, all before Sarah turned 5. Before she learned to perform, before she chose to become a monster. Dorothy kept those 3 photos. They were the only evidence that somewhere, briefly, the daughter Margaret loved might have existed before evil took hold. 1 year after the tragedy that shook Minneapolis, Dorothy Chen stood at Margaret's grave on a crisp December morning, holding a letter that would change how everyone understood this story. The letter had arrived from an unexpected source, a woman named Catherine Palmer from Seattle, who claimed to be Sarah's biological half-sister. "I've been following the trial, the news, everything," Catherine had written. "My father was Marcus Sullivan. I discovered this through DNA testing 5 years ago. Like Sarah, I inherited his genetics. Unlike Sarah, I chose differently." Catherine arrived in Minneapolis on December 24th, exactly 1 year after Margaret's final Christmas. She met with Dorothy, Derek, Emily, and Patricia at the Margaret Thompson Foundation offices. "I need you to understand something," Catherine began, her hands trembling. "I have the same brain abnormalities Sarah had, the same lack of activity in empathy centers. I'm clinically a psychopath. But I've spent my entire adult life in intensive therapy, learning to choose right from wrong intellectually rather than emotionally." Dorothy sat back, stunned. "You're saying—" "I'm saying that Sarah had a choice. She always had a choice. I feel no natural empathy, no genuine love, no real remorse. But I've learned through years of education and therapy that my actions affect others. I've gained knowledge about consequences. Every day I choose not to harm others, not because I feel it's wrong, but because I intellectually understand it's wrong." Catherine pulled out her own psychiatric files, decades of treatment, brain scans identical to Sarah's. "The lesson here isn't that psychopaths are doomed to be monsters, it's that Sarah chose to be one. Margaret's love wasn't wasted. It was offered to someone who chose to weaponize it rather than learn from it." Derek leaned forward. "Why are you telling us this?" "Because Margaret deserves the truth. Her education of Sarah, her love, her sacrifices, they weren't failures. Sarah failed herself by choosing evil when she had examples of good all around her. I had no such examples, no Margaret to love me, yet I still chose to seek help, to gain knowledge about how to live without destroying others." The revelation sent shockwaves through everyone who'd followed the case. Here was living proof that Sarah's evil was a choice, not an inevitability. Patricia made a decision that day. "Catherine, would you be willing to speak at our foundation events? Your story could save lives." Catherine agreed, and her first speech drew an audience of 500. She spoke about the difference between capacity for empathy and choice of action, about how education saved her from becoming like Sarah. "The greatest lesson from Margaret Thompson's story," Catherine said, "isn't that love can't reach psychopaths, it's that psychopaths can choose to be reached." Sarah had every opportunity: a loving mother, financial security, access to mental health resources. She had the knowledge that her actions caused pain. She simply didn't care. Meanwhile, the Margaret Thompson Foundation had grown exponentially. They developed an early warning system for elder financial abuse that was being implemented nationwide. The education program had trained over 3,000 social workers to recognize signs of exploitation. Jason Lancaster, seeking redemption, had become an unexpected advocate. He traveled to senior centers, sharing his story as a warning. I thought I was a player, using an old woman for money. I didn't realize I was being played too, that Sarah was using me as a tool. The lesson I learned too late is that when you participate in evil, even passively, you become its victim too. The foundation received a letter that brought everyone to tears. It was from Mrs. Eleanor Chang, 91 years old, from Portland. Your educational materials saved my life. My grandson started showing the same signs Sarah did: the fake tears, the manufactured crises, the isolation tactics. Because of Margaret's story, I recognized it immediately. I got help, protected my assets, and forced him into treatment. He's now in intensive therapy, learning through education what empathy means, even if he can't feel it. Margaret's death saved my life, and maybe saved my grandson from becoming a monster. On the second anniversary of Margaret's death, December 24th, the foundation held its first annual Margaret Thompson Day of Remembrance. Over 2,000 people attended: victims, survivors, families, and advocates. Dorothy gave the keynote speech. Margaret Thompson died thinking she'd failed. She hadn't. Her story has become the education that saved hundreds of elderly people from exploitation. Her love, which Sarah mocked as weakness, has become the strength that powers this movement. The knowledge gained from her tragedy has transformed elder protection nationwide. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when a young woman approached the microphone during open testimony. She was Sarah's age, beautiful, composed. My name is Rachel Morrison. Sarah Thompson was my mentor through her fake charity. She was teaching me to be like her, to see elderly people as resources to exploit. She gave me knowledge on how to destroy lives for profit. The audience held its breath. But then I saw what she did to her mother. I saw Margaret's face in court, the complete devastation of a woman who'd given everything to a daughter incapable of love. And I realized I was about to become that monster. Sarah's arrest saved me from becoming her. Margaret's sacrifice gave me the education I needed to choose differently. Rachel now worked for the foundation, using her insider knowledge of predator tactics to help identify and stop exploitation. She'd helped save 43 elderly people in just 6 months. As the ceremony concluded, Dorothy stood once more. Margaret Thompson taught us the ultimate lesson. Love isn't weakness, even when it's betrayed. Choosing to trust, to care, to give, these aren't foolish acts. They're what separate us from the Sarah Thompsons of the world. The final speaker was unexpected. Mitchell Stevens, now 82, who donated $15 million to the foundation. Sarah Thompson saw me as her next victim. Margaret Thompson's death made me her final failure. But here's what I've learned through this education. We elderly aren't victims waiting to happen. We're people who've earned the right to trust, to love, to believe in human kindness. Sarah tried to weaponize that trust. Margaret proved that trust itself isn't the problem. Predators are. Dear viewers of Voices of Auntie Rose, this story carries profound lessons about the nature of love, trust, and choice. How did this story touch your heart? Does it remind you of someone in your life who loves unconditionally? Or perhaps someone who takes advantage of that love? The knowledge within this tragedy can protect those we cherish most. Please share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. Your insights and personal connections to this story matter deeply to us. Have you witnessed elder exploitation? Have you seen love persevere despite betrayal? We want to hear from your heart. If this story moved you, please subscribe to Voices of Auntie Rose, hit the like button, and share this video with others who might need to hear Margaret's story. Every day, we bring you powerful narratives that explore the depths of human nature and the triumph of the human spirit. Remember, the greatest lesson from Margaret Thompson's life isn't how she died, but how she chose to love despite knowing the truth about her daughter. That choice, to remain human in the face of inhumanity, is the ultimate victory. To everyone watching, may you have good health, joyful days, and peaceful hearts. May you find the strength to love wisely but never stop loving completely. Until we meet again in our next video, remember, choose love, but protect yourself. Choose trust, but stay aware. Choose forgiveness, but establish boundaries. Thank you for joining us at Voices of Auntie Rose. Goodbye for now, and see you in the next video.